artillery, munition, all of that will be provided in the coming weeks and months. I would like to urge all those present here today that they support our initiative that aims to strengthen Ukraine's air defense. Please assist them and support them to the best of your abilities. For I believe that the best reconstruction is the one for which there is no need. In February, Volodymyr Zelensky and I signed an agreement about security cooperation and long-term support, as did more than a dozen of other countries. These agreements will provide insurance for the future of Ukraine, a future in freedom and peace. They will also provide insurance for entrepreneurs like you who are already in Ukraine, active in Ukraine, or are considering doing so. The recovery and the modernization of the country will require massive investment. The World Bank has calculated that almost $500 billion will be required for the next 10 years. The day after tomorrow, President Zelensky and I will meet again at the D7 summit in Apulia. I will speak out strongly there for far-reaching and long-term pledges of support for Ukraine. Given the dimension of the task we're talking about here, we'll also need to rely on private capital. The recovery of Ukraine is and has to be a business case too. And those will be front and center who engage right from the start, who develop economic ties to Ukraine now and expand it. As far as German business and industry is concerned, I can say that is exactly what they're doing. Hundreds of German entrepreneurs are actively engaged in Ukraine, employing 35 employees in the automobile sector alone. Despite the war, there has not been an outflow of German investments, and our trade volume has clearly markedly risen compared to the pre-war period. Ukraine is number one for investment guarantees issued by the federal government. The number of members of our Chamber of Commerce in Kyiv has increased by more than 60% last year. And all of that goes to show that the economy, that the business community is aware of the potential that Ukraine has to offer. Ukraine is a big country with a well-educated population. And despite the serious impact of the war, the economy is forecast to grow once again this year. It is above all investment in the construction sector that is boosting the economy, but Ukraine's agriculture too is a global player. It is an enormous achievement that the export of agricultural goods is back to pre-war level, and it is also very important for global food security. The Ukraine has great potential to offer in the field of renewables and hydrogen, but also in up-and-coming sectors like digitization and IT, armaments, health technologies, and pharmaceuticals. These areas will therefore be a special focus of our conference today and tomorrow. When one speaks about recovery of Ukraine, we also speak about the recovery of a future member state of the European Union. Only a few months after the outbreak of Russia's war against Ukraine, we pledged towards Ukraine that the future of Ukraine would be in the European Union. We stand by that pledge. Since then, Ukraine has set out on the path in the direction of the European Union, despite the difficult circumstances. Despite the war, it consistently implements reforms, and we support Ukraine in that endeavor because we are convinced that an efficient administration at all levels, consistent anti-corruption efforts, and inclusive society are all preconditions also for private engagement and for a successful recovery. With its Ukraine plan, Ukraine has clearly defined its reform agenda. In February this year, the EU promised and pledged financial assistance to the amount of €50 billion. This reform plan provides orientation for everyone, including private companies. We support private engagement in Ukraine wherever we can, especially small and medium-sized companies, and we've therefore concluded an international alliance today on the fringes of our conference, together with partners like the World Bank, the EU and the Japanese Agency for International Cooperation. We are, for example, supporting Ukraine's Business Development Fund which is modeled on the German Kreditanstalt for Wiederaufbau, KfW. Without wanting to anticipate what you're going to say, dear Ursula, I would simply like to highlight that we are working intensively to improve the availability of equity capital for Ukrainian companies. Together with the EU Commission and other national and international partners, we are on a good path towards providing substantive incentives for private investments in key areas of Ukraine's economy. The Ukraine Business Guide, for example, lists the different promotional tools of the federal government who want to be active in Ukraine. Together with the United States, we have taken the initiative for the Business Advisory Council, which will provide advice and counsel for Ukraine and the donor countries. The first meeting took place yesterday, and they will be the voice of the business community and an engine for institutional reforms and economic modernization. The first chairman of the Business Advisory Council will be Dr. Christian Bruch, the president and CEO of Siemens Energy. If I may say so, I believe that to be an excellent choice.
Denn das Thema Energie steht für uns alle ganz oben auf der
For the topic of energy is right at the top of the agenda for all of us. Russia continues to, almost on a daily basis, attack the energy infrastructure in Ukraine. But despite these attacks, Ukraine's energy supply has been maintained by and large. We have been helpful in that regard, not only by repairing and protecting transformer stations that have been damaged and lines, but also by investing in decarbonization and energy efficiency and in a decentralized, resilient energy supply. By the way, Ukraine has already become part of the European Union in the electricity sector. Since we linked up the electricity grids in March 2022, Ukraine has time and again exported surplus electricity to the EU, thus contributing to energy security in our countries. And that illustrates something that is true for the recovery in Ukraine. Everyone benefits.
It's in the people.
It's in the people. That was the idea with which I began my statement. It is also characterizing our conference. Ukraine and Germany thought it important to have present today representatives of the regions, the municipalities, and civil society. And there's another group we must not forget when we speak about recovery and the opportunities linked to a recovery. I think of the many Ukrainians that have found refuge in our countries fleeing from Russia's terror. More than 1 million have come to Germany alone. No one is in a position to tell them today when the war is going to end, but what we can say is that it will end. We will rebuild Ukraine. It will be stronger, freer, and more prosperous than before. And millions of Ukrainians who live in our countries today can serve as living bridges, women and men, able to speak the language of the respective countries, who work in German companies now and who might tomorrow play an important part in the recovery of Ukraine. It's in the people. Welcome to Berlin. Slava Ukraini.
Please welcome now the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky.
Дякую тобі. Дякуємо вам.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank all of you. Thank you, Olaf. I would like to thank you, and I would like to thank you, Ursula. I would like to thank all our friends who are supporting us. I would like to thank Germany, And I would like to thank my people, all of you, for what you've done for Ukraine. Long live Ukraine.
That you understood. But we spoke a lot, you know, our language almost. Дорогі Олафе, Урсула, шановні учасники.
Dear Olaf, dear Ursula, dear participants of the conference, it is a great honor for us to be here today, and I would like to thank you for your attention and for your support for the protection of the lives of the Ukrainians, the lives that have to prevail because we want to win this war. This war, dear friends, takes place at different levels of resistance. When we think of the people at the front, of the soil, the ground, the heaven, and the sea, we are fighting against military attacks of the occupying force, and our economic protection is important. We have to ensure that all the foundations of social activities remain: jobs, taxation opportunities, support for the entrepreneurs in order to drive the economy. Political resistance is what we are showing. We are all engaged in the effort to withstand the attempt to drive a wedge between the countries of the democratic world. We are fighting for humanity in the world, to allow the people in the country to continue to live a normal life, to show endurance, to prevail, to win the war. That is the kind of resistance we are showing. Resistance in all areas, in the military area, in protecting the country, in showing resistance also as members of civil society in the face of the battle and the war that is being waged. To continue to pursue a European lifestyle, a lifestyle that is being demolished and destroyed wherever Putin is active, wherever Russia places its foot. It begins with the division and hybrid warfare, as has been the case in Moldova and Georgia, and later we witness a total war like the war against Ukraine. The front plays an important part. In 2 years of war, Ukrainians have proven that they are able to withstand the attacker and to advance in that area. We can force them to withdraw. We have regained the Black Sea, and we have furnished proof, thanks to the modern air defense system, that we are capable of bringing down Russian missiles. Now, what is important? Key abilities in order to be able to place Russia at a disadvantage and rob them of the strategic advantages that it has had. Advantage with regard to the airspace is therefore important, defending us from missiles and attacks via the air, which will allow us to make advances, military advances on the ground, because Russia aims to destroy the lives of people in our villages and towns. Hundreds of bombs are being showered upon the heads of the people of Ukraine. On a daily basis, we're witnessing destruction by missiles and drones. As long as we are not able to rob Russia of the ability to terrorize Ukraine, Putin will not have a genuine interest in sitting down at a table and to negotiate peace. But we won't allow them to destroy the lives of the people with its missiles. Air defense is really the answer for everything. And I would like to thank you, Olaf, for helping us, providing us with air defense capabilities. Germany is one of the global leading powers. You have supported us in the defense area, and I would like to thank all your industrial producers of military technology. Your IST system has been of great value to us. And I'd like to thank you for all the other equipment and weapons you've provided us with, because they have helped us withstand Russia's attacks from the air and on the sea. We have to do more. We need at least 7 Patriot systems in order to be able to protect our cities and urban centers from attacks via the air, in order to ensure that we can maintain our normal life, and our people have deserved us to undertake that attempt. Protecting their rights, the defense of the guarantees that a normal life can take place. And I would like to thank you, Olaf. I would like to thank the Federal Chancellor for the support you've shown to Ukraine in the area of air defense. Here in Berlin, we are also seeing that Mark Rutte is with us today, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, who has worked with the United States and other partners. We are in the process of enhancing Ukraine's air defense in cooperation with these countries. We are trying to bring more and new air defense systems to Ukraine. If we succeed in doing so, there will be more security for the people, greater certainty that peace will come back to our country. One of the most important targets is the energy and electricity sector of Ukraine. Energy resources, the generation of energy, is being used by President Putin as a weapon. He wants to bring us to our knees by destroying our energy supply. Ukraine is suffering under a destructive form and a destructive approach that Russia is taking with regard to the field of electricity. They've already been able to destroy 9 gigawatt of our capacity of electricity production. And last winter, we needed 18 gigawatt in the particularly difficult areas. We are not capable of producing that quantity. Now, figures don't speak a very clear language, but what am I talking about? Take Berlin. Berlin has 2 gigawatt in consumption. Munich, 3 gigawatt. We have much more than that, or need much more, and have lost much more than major cities in other parts of the world need. 60% of the heat produced, a third of the water power we have has been destroyed by President Putin, and that is not the end of Russia's terror. However, we have to draw a line and have to invest and begin with restoring our energy production. We have to do whatever is in our power in order to maintain our electricity and energy supply, to make good lost ground in that regard. It's important, not only from our perspective. By attacking Ukraine, Putin attempts to not only destroy our electricity targets, but he also aims at other objects, such as gas storage tanks and interconnectors linking our system to Europe's systems. Recovery, reconstruction will be beneficial in a twofold sense. For Ukraine and for Europe, everyone will benefit, and that is the basis of electricity security, energy security for decades to come, and a guarantee that Russia's forces cannot trigger a blackout wherever they want to do so. We have what is required for modern energy systems, but we will need support, financial support, grants and loans. We are talking investments here, not promotional funds, but promising investments. We are a big market for your technology. We are a big market for your opportunities. You can build systems of the future and create thousands of jobs, produce an economic recovery, and in the short term, we will have a renewal that can come about quickly and that is not costly. This is what we have to aim for before winter breaks. This has to be achieved in the next 3 to 4 months, and we know how we can make sure that this happens. What we want from you is to provide us with the necessary equipment, the technology, the hardware that is required for heating plants and electricity plants that are not running right now. If we have that, we can change the situation overnight, can renew, can preserve daily the normal life of the peoples, generate gas so as to make sure that we can fill gaps that exist in the field of electricity, later than begin with hydrogen and other forms of energy. So do more in those areas, get the support of European, of German companies, because they're leading in that sector, technologically speaking. We have a plan how we can, this year already, maintain 1 gigawatt of production capacity. I'm not only talking perspectives here, I'm speaking about solving problems. The war is taking place here and now. We can generate 4 gigawatts in the next 2 years. We can get there. We are already signing the first contracts in those areas, but as I said, we need your support because you're leading in those areas when it comes to, for example, exporting. We need your expertise, your knowledge, your capabilities. That will make all our countries stronger. Third, political area. No matter how the political climate in Europe will change, the reality is the following. The European Union is something that all Europeans need, without exception. Every nation that shares common values with other nations and wants to live in peace like us. You know, Ukrainians, we are such a nation, as is our neighbor, the Republic of Moldova and Georgia, as are the Baltic countries and the peoples living there, all those nations and people who value peace and rule of law. We will see the day where Belarus will be free in Europe. I'm confident of that. Europe has done whatever it can, and as has my country. We are ready to begin accession negotiations with the European Union. We fulfilled all the necessary requirements. Negotiations are taking place, frameworks are being defined, but why do we need this? We keep our pledges and promises. That is another proof of the fact that Europe will not be brought to its knees through outside pressure. Fourth, motivation. In the 20th century, Europe has undergone dramatic renewal. A Europe that still had the wounds of the past, but it has risen to become a major power, a global community. Everything is working. You have your tradition of production, the trades and crafts, and here I think in particular of Germany. That is the right path to pursue, and you interact as Europeans with the rest of the world. In order for that to happen, you took concrete decisions, entered into concrete agreements, had concrete ideas and concepts by entrepreneurs in all your countries. When we, Olaf and I, planned this conference, and our teams planned this conference, I asked to ensure that this should become a practically oriented conference. Contracts, agreements should be the outcome that were to give us an impulse in the field of economic recovery and development, in the interest of both sides, Germany and Ukraine, and I'm confident that this will be the outcome of this conference. Initiatives at the legal level, at the governmental level, but also at the municipal level. We have many agreements and contracts that have been drafted, that are ready for signature. Many partners from all over the world will leave this conference with many new contracts and agreements in their pockets for military equipment, weapons, for energy, renovating, recovery, refurbishment, for the reconstruction of modern energy production, initiatives in the social sphere, in the field of education, construction, housing, medical technology. I would like to highlight once again the support that the companies have shown to the economy in Ukraine. And as the Chancellor just pointed out, this is something that provides us with the strength to continue to live our lives in a time of war and to give us this idea that we can live a life in diversity. I'm absolutely certain that Ukraine will implement its national recovery plan. It will be a European recovery. It's not going to be possible without Germany's input. Global German strength. And I would like to thank you for your support. I'd like you for inviting me here. Thank you, Olaf. Thank you, Ursula. Thank you. And I address these words to all my partners, our partners. Thank you for your support for the people in my country. And I address my words also to the peoples of your countries. You've taken Ukrainians in with open arms, and that has been so important. That is what unites us. And we are honest, we are open, we are united and very, very brave. Long live Ukraine.
Please welcome now the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Chancellor Scholz, lieber Olaf, President Zelensky, dear Volodymyr, First Lady, dearest Olena, Presidents, Prime Ministers, Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It has been almost 900 days since Russia's full-scale invasion began. But the stakes are just as clear as on day one. We know what the two sides in this conflict stand for. Russia fights to end Ukraine. Ukraine fights to end this war. Russia fights for the past. Ukraine fights for a better future. Russia destroys. Ukraine defends. And in no place is this contrast starker than in the embattled city of Kharkiv. 2 years ago, the people of Kharkiv pushed back Russia's aggression. And since then, they haven't only rebuilt, they have reopened new cultural centers. They have drafted plans for a greener city, a city that thrives on traditional industries as well as innovative startups. But Russia's bombs are now raining again from the sky, targeting apartment buildings and shopping centers. Putin wants to crush the city and its love for life and liberty. So Kharkiv and Ukraine need all our support. And this is what brings us here today to Berlin. Putin must fail and Ukraine must prevail. And we must help Ukraine to rise from the ashes and to be the master of its own future. This means, first and foremost, that we must provide Ukraine with the means to defend itself. At last year's recovery conference, I said we should transfer to Ukraine the proceeds of immobilized Russian assets. And now we are making it happen in line with international law and while ensuring stability of financial markets. Around 1.5 billion euros from the windfall profits will become available in July. 90% of these funds will go to defense, 10% to reconstruction, and later this week at the G7 summit, we will further discuss how Ukraine can benefit even quicker and even more from the proceeds of the immobilized Russian assets. We have always said my friends, we have always said that Russia must be held accountable for its crimes, and now we make Russia pay. Ladies and gentlemen, the rationale of this conference has always been to look beyond Ukraine's immediate needs and chart a credible path towards its economic renaissance. In London last year, I presented the new 50 billion euro facility for Ukraine to provide predictable support until 2027. And member states supported, also thanks to your tireless efforts, Olaf. Thank you very much for that. The facility is backed by a solid plan for reforms and investments. It's now up and running. 6 billion euros have already reached Ukraine. And here in Berlin, we are now signing the first agreements worth 1.4 billion euros with our partner banks to attract investments in Ukraine from the private sector. And as you have already mentioned, Olaf, we will also launch dedicated support for equity investments in Ukraine. Our partner banks will be able to apply for EU budget support when they invest in equity funds active in Ukraine. And in that way, we, the European Union, help them remove some of the risks associated with equity investment. Our aim is to improve access to finance for Ukrainian businesses, especially for SMEs and startups, that can help modernize Ukrainian economy. It is so crucial for Ukraine's recovery. Take, for example, areas like IT or digitalization. Take renewable energy. Take the whole topic of critical raw materials. We will start with a pilot to address the most urgent needs, which can be scaled up over time. And I know the business community wants to step up its contribution. And together, we will mobilize the financial firepower that is necessary to help Ukraine resist and to recover. You can count on us. This includes, of course, also continued material support in view of Russia's systematic attacks on Ukraine's energy grid, and you just, dear Volodymyr, described it. So we have raised close to 500 million euros so far for the urgent repairs. In addition, we are providing 1,000 more generators for urgent power generation, and thousands of solar panels are about to arrive in Ukraine. The aim is to help decentralize the power system and thus increase the resilience of the Ukrainian electricity and power system. And today, I can also announce that we will deliver to Ukraine an additional 1.9 billion euros from our Ukraine facility by the end of this month. This is because of the comprehensive reforms and investment strategy that Ukraine has approved. And my dear friends, Ukraine has done all these reforms while fighting a war. This is so outstanding. Thank you very much for being so reliable. This reform and investment, we call it the Ukraine Plan. The Ukraine Plan, for example, includes justice sector reforms, anti-corruption reforms, and many other reforms. And this is the basis of making Ukraine attractive for business and investors. And it is also bringing Ukraine closer to our European Union. Ukraine has fulfilled all the steps that we had set out. And this is why we believe the European Union should begin accession talks with Ukraine already by the end of this month. President Zelensky, dear Volodymyr, this is the first Ukraine Recovery Conference that is held inside the European Union. And this is where your country belongs. Kharkiv is Europe, Ukraine is Europe, and our union is your home. Slava Ukraini. Long live Europe.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. The opening panels will start in a moment, following a short technical break. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage for the first opening panel, United in Defense, United in Recovery, Stronger Together, the Federal Foreign Minister of Germany, Annalena Baerbock, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Italy, Antonio Tajani, the Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs of the United Kingdom, David Cameron, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Poland, Radosław Sikorski, and the Special Representative for Ukraine's Economic Recovery of the United States of America, Penny Pritzker.
So, good morning, everybody. I know we are at a serious conference, however, there's a call for Italy now, the foreign minister. In the meantime, I would like to start because we have a really packed agenda and we are here all for work. As the Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen put so precisely, while Ukraine fights every day to end this war, we see since 900 days that Russia is fighting every day to end Ukraine's lifeline. And when I've been, for the 7th time since the beginning of the war in Ukraine just 3 weeks ago, the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, my dear friend Dmytro, and I, we have seen also what it means again and again that Russia is attacking for 900 days the lifelines at the thermal power station Tripilska, just 20 kilometers away from Kiev. For years, the station has supplied 3 million people with electricity, our normal daily lifeline. On April 11th, Russia fired 82 missiles and drones on it. And 82 missiles and drones couldn't be stopped. So when we went there, we saw a thermal power station for 3 million people with the ceiling perforated with holes, where there were only skeletons of machines left. A lifeline for 3 million people destroyed. And as the Commissioner President, the Chancellor, and the President of Ukraine have underlined, this is not by chance. This is for a reason. To attack Ukraine on 3 levels. To attack Ukraine's sovereignty, to conquer the territory, to attack Ukraine's infrastructure like in Tripilska, power plants, rail lines, schools, to attack the country's economic and social life, and to attack on the 3rd level Ukraine's future in the European Union. Because the Russian president knows that the European Union is a life insurance for peace and freedom. And as we are here to discuss these 3 dimensions, I'm very happy that I have a distinguished group of foreign ministers and friends here with me who are capable of jumping through these 3 different aspects of economic strength and power, of reconstruction, of political dimensions for the European pathway, and also the military issue of defense, especially air defense. So I'm very happy to have you with me here on the panel, and I would like to ask you all to cherry pick on the topics you're most capable to speak on when we're standing here united in defense, united in recovery, stronger together. I would like to start with the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, with you, Dmytro. Even though we are seeing the destruction every day, we are also seeing the reconstruction every day. Maybe you can give us here an impression for the business people, but also for so many mayors and city councillors who are doing the reconstruction. What does it look like to have a short-term reconstruction and also having the long-term needs in your mind? So how would you like to bridge them even more successfully in the future?
Thank you. Thank you, Anna-Lena. Thank all of you who have gathered today in this hall for this important conference. Well, the short-term need is clear, and my president spoke about it, and Chancellor and President of the Commission mentioned it as well. Support to our energy system, because winter is coming, and we have to go through it. But when it comes to a long-term perspective, which doesn't mean that it has to be postponed, it has to be continued, there are 5 processes, 5 steps that need to be continuously made. The first one, the road to recovery starts with air defense, because the less is damaged, the less it takes to recover. And therefore, please make every effort to follow Germany's example and deliver additional air defense systems to Ukraine in the shortest perspective. Second, investments. I would like to call on businesses not to wait until the war is over to invest in Ukraine. Start working now. Find the project, look in the community, look at the business that you want to work with, conduct feasibility study, develop your business plans so that you will be ready at any given moment to invest. Third, of course, macro-financial assistance, and we count that governments and the European Commission will continue to provide it. Fourth, membership of Ukraine in the European Union. This is an instrument, a very efficient instrument of recovery. And fifth, Russia's frozen assets. We should be ambitious, we should be bold, we should find a solution so that Russia pays in real life with real money. These are the 5 ways to recovery. We are advancing on all of them, but we need to do it faster.
Thank you very much. And Maybe to jump into it into more detail, because we have seen the big projects like reconstruction and partnership of some hospitals and also of some big power plants. But as we are seeing that Ukraine is really built on the small and medium-sized enterprises and companies, maybe you can also underline a bit with regard to loans and funds, and also with regard of employment in your country. What could be a support package also for small and medium-sized entrepreneurship?
Yes, please trust in the entrepreneurial spirit of Ukrainians. We know how to do business. We have people who are keen to recover, to rebuild their country. And of course, creating favorable conditions for them, helping them to access capital, loans, is fundamental importance. And here comes another encouragement towards foreign governments from my side. Please launch programs and incentives for your businesses to invest in Ukraine, but also to help Ukrainian businesses to grow up and to implement projects. They can do this job if we send a clear signal and we provide clear incentives to that end. We as the Ukrainian government are doing our utmost to mobilize all the resources that we can to create these conditions. With your help, we can multiply this effect in geometrical progression.
Thank you. Speaking about investment also in small and medium-sized enterprises, Radek Sikorski, Foreign Minister of Poland. Your country has been one of the countries joining the European Union within the last decades, and we have celebrated it together 6 weeks ago. I would have two questions in my mind. First, maybe describing, even without a wartime, why these investments are so crucial also on the pathway towards European Union process, but also as a second thought, when we celebrated the entrance of the 10 Eastern European countries to the European Union back in 2004 and now in 2024, we had all this thought in our mind when we're standing at the Oder Bridge between Germany and Poland. What would it have meant if Poland wouldn't have entered the European Union? Maybe you can intensify a bit on the discussions within your own country, what it meant for your country, not only for the last 2 decades, but especially since the last 2 years.
History and geography matter also between Poland and Ukraine. So in Poland, we remember keenly that Russia has been trying to colonize Ukraine for 300 years. In the 19th century, it was actually forbidden to publish in Ukrainian in the Russian Empire. Then they did it again in the 20th century. During collectivization, the Bolsheviks killed roughly 5 million Ukrainian farmers and exterminated Ukrainian cultural elites. And today they are doing the same again. You just have to look at what they're doing in the occupied territories. This is cultural genocide at the very least. And geography matters too. When you look at the world from Warsaw, 250 kilometers to our north is the Kaliningrad exclave, Russia, with a storage place for, we think, roughly 100 tactical nuclear warheads. If you go 250 kilometers east, you have Belarus, where the Russians and the Belarusians have engineered an assault on our border, the EU border, the Schengen zone border. And then 250 kilometers to the southeast is the Ukrainian border. And some of these Russian missiles that you mentioned actually cross into Poland. They sometimes go through Poland and attack Ukrainian cities, and sometimes they are let loose. One of them landed 10 kilometers from my house, which is in western Poland, 250 kilometers from here. So I'm putting to our German hosts that this is far closer. The danger is much bigger than some people think. And yes, Poland wants to be a hub for Ukraine's reconstruction, just like it is today a hub for the supplies of the resistance effort. And we think we have some advantages to bring. First of all, the roughly 2 million people who have been to Poland, either before the war in our labor market or as refugees now, there will be links, family links, that will enable economic activity. Secondly, we have, as you mentioned, a recent experience of negotiating and of fulfilling the EU entry criteria will be helpful to the Ukrainian state structures. And thirdly, we know what it takes to fulfill various criteria. For example, we have reliable and inexpensive technologies for water treatment, for food processing. Those are the kinds of things where I think Poland and Ukraine are made for each other.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for remembering us that it's only 7 hours by car from here, Berlin, through Poland to the Ukrainian borders, and it's way longer to drive down than at least to the south of Italy. So moving on the European Union on towards south, Foreign Minister of Italy, dear Antonio, your country also now as the chair of the G7 at the moment. What do you think are the most important tools to support Ukraine with regard to investment, also to support companies investing into Ukraine, and combining this together with the reform process for the European Union accession?
First of all, I want to thank Germany for organizing this third Ukraine Recovery Conference. Next year, Italy will organize the fourth session. This is an honor for us. But first of all, I totally agree with Dmytro when he says the first strategy for the recovery, for the reconstruction, is to protect Ukrainian infrastructures, Ukrainian buildings, through air defense system. For this, I want to inform you, Italy is ready for sending a new military package with something for air defense of Ukraine. On G7, Italy, in the next days, there is a G7 with the head of states in Italy. But during our G7 with the Minister for the Affairs, we pushed hard in favor of Ukraine, in favor of the reconstructions, in favor of our involvement, because to protect Ukraine is to protect Europe, to protect democracy, to protect the international law. And I think we are ready as the second industrial country in Europe for a strong engagement through our big companies, but also through our small and medium-sized companies. There are 4 million of small and medium-sized companies. There's a big delegation here ready for investing in Ukraine. And Italy is ready not only for a military help, but also for helping the other different sectors. There is the second news is a new package, 140 million euros, of course, for action on infrastructures, on railways, on health, agri-food sector, humanitarian sector, and also on the mining. This is the last decision of Italian government. Of course, there are also 45 million euro for the reconstruction of Odessa Cathedral. Today, we signed a memorandum with the Ukrainian government for our cooperation in these very important sectors. Also, at a cultural level, I want to underline this point because for Italy, it is important to back the reconstruction of the Cathedral of Odessa as part of UNESCO. And for this, I think Italy wants to, through our two museums, Triennale di Milano and Museo Maxi in Rome, and with UNESCO, we are ready for doing more for the reconstruction of this city. Is an Italian city, Odessa, for this, for us, for Italy, is very important to work in this city. Cultural heritage is very important because Ukraine is part of Europe, and we are ready through our action for paving the way for the full partnership of Ukraine in the European Union. Your market will be very important in the future. The internal market for our companies is crucial. Our engagement is not only, of course, a support for Ukraine, but it's also an opportunity for our companies to be present in Ukraine. Count on us, count on Italian big companies, but also small companies supported by 3 state companies, each such as Siemens. They are supporting at the finance level our company for the internationalization. And for me, the diplomacy of growth is crucial, and count on us, we will work hard for Ukraine. Slava Ukraine.
Thank you very much, and we can hear from the applause that there's a high need of being very precise on how to support Ukraine, because promises won't rebuild. So thank you for going also in the details of state support for big companies. Maybe to drop here, this is why we, for Germany, also focused on export guarantees for bigger companies, but especially for smaller ones, to support 40,000 businesses with low interest rates loan for the small and medium-sized companies. And as there are many people in the room who do have companies or who do invest, please do outreaches to your governments in this regard, because we know that the investment has to be on the ground as soon as possible. Speaking about investments on the ground, David, Foreign Minister of the UK, you have not only been the host of last year's Ukraine Recovery Conference, but also when you have done your first trip to Ukraine in November 23, you announced as one of the first projects the cooperation between British insurers and Ukrainian state banks to cut costs of damaged ships. And we know also what followed afterwards, also in the combination of defense, air defense, but also with different sorts of military support in the Black Sea, and then the combination of military support for the Black Sea and the insurances. So maybe you would like to highlight a bit why it was so important to address insurances directly, and also what examples could follow out of the things you have done. And I would really like to applaud you for the efforts UK did in the regard of the Black Sea.
Well, thank you, Annalena, and thank you for welcoming everyone to Berlin. As you say, you're building on the strong foundations of the London Ukraine Recovery Conference, which I think marshaled over $60 billion for Ukraine, and it's brilliant that you brought everyone together here. I mean, my view is very simple, which is Ukraine is fighting a war on the land, a war on the Black Sea, and here a war for the future, and we want to help Ukraine win all of those wars. And I think we can. When I look at the picture, I mean, the cards are very much stacked in our favor. When it comes to this war for the future, we have got deeper capital markets, we've got stronger economies, we've got better alliances. I mean, look at the array of businesses in this room. The question for us is, are we going to have the courage to play all these cards, and are we going to have the patience to make sure that Ukraine wins in the long run? Those are the crucial things. Now, you mentioned the insurance issue. I mean, this was based very much on Ukraine's success. It wasn't, you know, some UN negotiation that cleared the Black Sea. It was the brave action of the Ukrainian Navy, backed by capable allies like Britain and others, that has sunk 25% of Putin's Black Sea fleet, pushed it back across the Black Sea and opened up the grain corridor so Ukraine can export again. And that's why Ukraine's economy grew by almost 6% last year. So we're working with an ally in Ukraine that's hugely capable, hugely entrepreneurial, and wants to rebuild for the future. But I think the question for us, and Dmytro makes this point very well, is we know what Russia's trying to do. They are trying to destroy the energy system. They're trying to take the coking coal that is crucial for Ukraine's iron and steel industry, and they're trying to destroy the gas storage in Ukraine as well. They're going after, with toughness and precision, Ukraine's key assets. And we have to ask ourselves, are we being equally tough and precise in return? We have rightly switched off a lot of Russian oil, but it's time to make sure we totally switch off Russian gas into Europe as well. Germany's been a shining example, but we need to do more. We also need to use these frozen Russian assets. We should be asking ourselves, what are the things that Putin dreads us from doing? He dreads us cutting off the oil and gas and the hydrocarbons. He dreads us going after these frozen Russian sovereign assets. And I hope as a very minimum at the G7 this week, we can agree that we use the interest from the frozen assets to roll up an enormous loan for Ukraine, and the money can flow way before we get elections in America in November. But we should also be going after Russia's shadow fleet. These ships are largely uninsured, they're unsafe, they're environmentally dangerous. I want to know every time they go to a neutral port, they're being inspected, they're being impounded, they're being stopped from taking Russian oil and sold around the world. We've got to ask ourselves on every one of these things, are we being as tough, as strong as we possibly can be? As I say, we have the cards in our deck. The strongest economies, the best alliances, the deep expertise, the knowledge. We've got to bring all of that to bear. Britain will play its part. We are with insurance, and it's great that Lloyd's Insurance, who are here today, helped with the Unity insurance for the Black Sea. We'll help with the city bridge we've got between the financial centre of London. We'll help with the tech bridge, which I've seen for myself in UK, and a lot of tech companies helping Ukrainian companies. And we'll help in every way we can. We've invested $15 billion so far. My Prime Minister will be announcing the next stage of that at the G7 at the weekend. Sometimes Prime Ministers take the announcement of the Foreign Secretary. I know that because I used to do it, so I don't, but we'll be making a generous contribution to reconstruction. And as we've already said, with the £3 billion, 4 billion euros, that we'll be investing in defense for Ukraine. That is this year, next year, and every year in the future for as long as it takes until Putin is defeated. And I think that's the approach we've got to take. Making sure this money is not just this year and next year, it's how long it takes, whatever it takes. And the battle for the future, this reconstruction of Ukraine, is in many ways, it's the thing Putin most dreads. He knows a successful Ukraine, a reformed Ukraine, a financially successful Ukraine, all those things it can be, is the greatest possible defeat. And I just make this last point. We're here with a lot of numbers being thrown about money. Will it be 60 billion that we raised in London, the 15 billion that the UK has spent, the billions, you're going to hear lots of numbers. I just tell you there's one thing. The numbers we are talking about will be nothing compared to the numbers we would have to invest if Ukraine isn't successful. In defense alone, during the Cold War, we were investing 5% of our GDP in defense, never mind 2% or 2.5%. So what you spend now, we will save later, and we'll see a successful Ukraine as a result.
thank you very much for being so sharp and moving from a country which unfortunately left the European Union to a country which is on another continent. However, the US, the largest donor for Ukraine and also therefore the biggest supporter for our European peace and freedom project in these times, as the US Congress approved funds of approximately 175 billion US dollars. 67% are designed for military and defense expenditures, and the other part obviously for economic and humanitarian support. And the US is also leading in coordinating energy sector support within the G7. Penny Pritzker, this is your main job for the US administration, the support for Ukraine, and obviously you're in for a long run, which we hoped for, and you underlined it in the last weeks. So how do you think we can ensure altogether the economic support for Ukraine, and how do you see also the role of the private sector, and maybe to accelerate, as David Cameron has underlined, also the private investments?
Well, thank you very much, and it's great to be here. I first just want to thank Germany and thank you for hosting the conference this year, and also for your partnership. Germany has really been an extraordinary partner to all of us as we step up to help Ukraine, whether it's in helping create a business advisory council or the life-saving Patriot systems that you have provided for Ukraine, or extending guarantees to your German companies so they can make investments, and of course housing over 1 million refugees. It's really, we're very, very grateful for all that Germany has done. I think we're at a pivotal moment when it comes to supporting Ukraine. And I just want to put it in perspective. If you think about what's happening over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I think it sends a very strong message. All of us send a very strong message to Putin, and it begins with this conference. And the message is really about the international commitment to Ukraine. This conference is step one, which is a real discussion about the economic issues and how we can coordinate ourselves to not just support Ukraine, but do so effectively and efficiently. The second is later this week, as we've discussed, the G7 meeting that will occur in Italy, which should have very important conversations about Ukraine, not the least of which around Russian sovereign assets. The peace talks that will occur in Switzerland the following week, that will have over 100 countries participating, almost 50% more than participated in the last conference, showing the momentum of the world behind defining peace, supporting Ukraine. And then, of course, the capstone with the Washington NATO summit, which will be where Ukraine will be such an important part of the conversation. The point being, I know, we're somewhat all distracted by the election super year that we're in, the EU, the UK, the US, and I could go on and on, India. But the international community is not losing faith, nor is it losing interest, nor is it distracted from what is going on in Ukraine. And this fight against Putin is top of mind for so many of us. And I'll take the US as a case in point, which is, if you look at the vote that occurred for the supplemental in just last month, 70% of our Congress, both houses of our Congress, supported the supplemental bill, over $60 billion of support for Ukraine. And I think that not only demonstrates our support, but it's also an indication of where the American people are when it comes to supporting Ukraine. And, the American people understand what's at stake. And they're not making this commitment out of an act of charity. They're making it out of understanding that this war of aggression poses a very serious threat to the United States and to our allies in Europe, to our way of life, to our economic security, and to our freedoms. And we know that. And I don't want there to be any ambiguity about it. And that's why the US, as well as our allies and friends here in this room, are rushing military, economic, and energy support to Ukraine. We get what's happening. We understand how serious the situation is. Let me just give the dimensions a little bit of that support. The military support, just in the last 45 days, the United States has sent over $2 billion of military equipment to Ukraine. On the economic front, which is what we're here to talk about at this conference, we're working with Ukraine to disperse the $7.8 billion of budget support, and as well as our one is to make sure that we target our $1.5 billion of economic recovery assistance precisely where the Ukrainians want to see it. We've also extended the 232 steel tariff exemptions just 10 days ago, allowing for imports of Ukrainian steel without tariffs. We're working with the Ukrainian government on a pre-project preparation framework. It's not just us, together with the EU, the UK, and Ukraine. We're trying to make sure that there are more ready, bankable projects to be financed. There's a lot of money right now, but we need more projects that are in a position to be financed. We're also launching new significant war risk reinsurance facility, which will multiply the marketplace for insurance. In addition to supporting SMEs and women's inclusion, women, have founded more than half the new businesses in the last year in Ukraine. So it's an enormous role for women to play. There's an enormous need for skilled development, which our private sector is quite invested in making sure happens. Also, given the energy situation, which is really, really dire, I'm announcing here that the United States is dedicating $824 million to support Ukraine's energy infrastructure. And I'll just say, look, all of this effort by not just the United States, but all of our allies, whether it's militarily, economically, on the energy front, it all depends on Ukraine continuing to embrace reform, which the Ukrainian government is doing. Ukraine has passed tough reforms, and they're going to keep the momentum up because I know they want to, it's essential for EU accession. It's urgent to tackle the corruption, the customs evasion, the gray markets. But Ukraine will also do it because 8 out of 10 of the population wants to see them take these very tough steps. I think one of the challenges for all of us is that as we all make our collective commitments to Ukraine reconstruction, it's certainly predicated upon having good stewardship by those who are managing the reconstruction efforts across the Ukrainian government. And the quality of leadership in Kyiv has to continue to reflect the integrity, unity, and democratic values that represent a true break from the Soviet era into the European and Western era that the Ukrainian people so desperately want and desire. So let me close by just saying that I believe that the combined support of all the countries represented on this stage and the acceleration of reforms and anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine, together with the stepped-up efforts of our private sector. The private sector has shown up here in force and is shown their interest. I think with all of that put together, we can provide the fuel that will power Ukraine into a true economic recovery and to become the prosperous, democratic, independent country that's integrated into the EU and NATO, that its people want and deserve. So I thank you for hosting us, and thank you for giving us a chance to come together and make all of our efforts even more impactful by working together.
Thank you very much, Penny Pritzker. And as you were so diving into also the reform process, I would like to underline that by two questions with regard to what Ukraine is doing. I mean, being in the midst of a war, defending your own country every day, and in that situation, harmonizing your industry standards with EU rules, reforming your judicial system, implementing safeguards against corruption, enabling that Ukraine, speaking about women, will enter also into the Istanbul Convention. This is obviously a very, very big task. So maybe just a very short question and short answer. What would you need more for support to help Ukraine in this reform pathway, which we all know is not very easy, even in peacetime, Dmytro?
Well, President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, I think made the best comment on reforms, and you just echoed her, that despite all these struggles we are facing, Ukraine has undertaken some enormously complicated reforms that allowed us to reach the point when the European Union has all the reasons to make a decision to open accession talks with Ukraine. When it comes to the next steps, I have one very simple request to all: believe in Ukraine. Do not get upset. There has never been a case when Ukrainian partners would not find a way out of the reform-related complexity. We always find the way out. Believe in Ukraine's capacity to outperform your expectations and even sometimes our own expectations. Thank you.
But having friends at your side is also very helpful. And therefore, I would like to ask this question also, Radek, to you. Knowing, as I said, and I mean that very much from the bottom of my heart, because we are all politicians as well, and we know that sometimes reforms are not the most easy things, even in times of peace. Radek Sikorski, from your perspective, again, from the reform process of your country, and also knowing sometimes political struggles in our democracies, what would you like to maybe give also as an advice to others, how to support this reform process, maybe also in the more tricky parts of judicial reforms, anti-corruption, but also capabilities with regard to administration? Like, again, we do have this University for European Matters between Poland and Germany and Frankfurt Oder and Słubice. So maybe you can dive a bit into what helped you on your pathway towards the European Union as an example for others, be it local communities, investors also, or governments to support Ukraine's accession pathway.
Well, first of all, Dmytro is right that Ukraine has already proven that she can do tough reforms. Let me remind you, we closed the text of the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with Ukraine, the association agreement, during the previous Polish presidency of the EU in 2011. And part of that was Ukraine getting visa-free regime with the EU, and that required huge reforms, biometric passports, databases of passport issued, and so on. And Ukraine did it, which is why it was easier to welcome the refugees when the emergency came. So yes, they can do it. They've also implemented most of the DCFTA. But you're right that the easiest way for Ukraine to lose the support of the European Union and all of us would be for the hydra of corruption to rear its ugly head again. And Ukraine needs to be very sensitive to that. And my advice would be, which I think was, the phrase was coined, I think in the Clinton administration, don't let this emergency go to waste. You will sometimes have to carry out politically difficult reforms. Do it now, when you have a national consensus that you want to join the West, whatever the cost, because after the war it will be harder. Politics, normal politics will return, and it will be harder. Better to do it now.
Thank you very much. Speaking about the perspective, and this is why we're here to support Ukraine's fight for peace and that this war will end. And I would like to move over to a colleague here in the audience because we are also in the eve of another peace conference in Switzerland, and we all know that the future of Ukraine does not only lie within the European Union, but also that the future will have a peace that is just, comprehensive and lasting. And for that it doesn't only need the European friends, the friends here at the stage, but worldwide friends. And therefore we are really thankful that Switzerland is hosting the next Peace Summit. And I would like to give the floor very briefly to Ignacio Cassis, the Foreign Minister of Switzerland. But I don't see, yeah, there's a microphone.
I'm here. Madam Chair, dear Annalena, dear colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Well, there are many ways to support Ukraine. As a neutral country, Switzerland is not allowed to militarily support Ukraine. This is the reason why we are looking for other ways. 4 months after the beginning of the war, we dare to organize the first recovery conference to think about recovery, reconstruction, resilience, rebuilding. We were told to be crazy at that time. 4 months after the beginning of the war, already talking about recovery. Now we are in Berlin. Thank you, David, for organizing last year the second conference in London, and thank you so much, Annalena, for this third conference, which you already announced 2 years ago in Lugano. And this is a promise which was very important in order to give prospect to the people. Now, another way we can support Ukraine is humanitarian demining. We are very active on this field, and we will organize in October this year in Lausanne, Switzerland, the second international conference on humanitarian demining after the first one held in Croatia. I see Gordon in the room. Thank you, Gordon, for organizing this conference in Zagreb. And then, of course, the topic which is expected to be held in very few hours. It will start on Saturday this week in Switzerland, in the region of the Lake of Lucerne, on a mountain. We have to climb up on a mountain to find common ground in order to kick off a process, a peace process. Well, it's not an easy task. You can imagine there are many critics about that, because should Russia be present, at which time during the process should we invite Russia on this peace process that should start this week? Well, this is one of the topics we will discuss at the conference, and at the same time we will also discuss ways of giving prospect to peace. We dared to talk about recovery 4 years ago. It is time now that we have the courage to talk about peace. And I count on you to be present at a very high level. By now we have almost 90 registered countries that will participate, most than half of them at the level of chief of state or chief of government, and then the other one at the level of ministers. So I guess it will be a good occasion not to go to waste in order to kick off this peace process. Thank you so much for your interest.
Thank you very much, Ignacio. As we have heard from the Chancellor in his opening speech, it's in the people of Ukraine. And we have all seen, and I would also say felt that over the last 900 days, the soldiers, the engineers, the nurses, but also the children. And I always remember one girl in Kharkiv telling me, the only wish I have is to just play volleyball again like we did before. And this is to remind us that this could be us. 7 hours away from Berlin, even just a jump over the border from Poland. So it's not only that it's in the people of Ukraine, but there's also a slogan in the train when we all go to Ukraine, be brave like a Ukrainian. So for the last 5 minutes, so 1 minute each, I would like to ask you, if you remember, it's in the people, so it must be also in us. And as an example of being brave like a Ukrainian, what would you wish from your own country, or maybe also from the distinguished guests here, 1,500 guests in business, in local communities, what next brave step that they would take to ensure that Ukraine will win this war? And we would start with you, Penny, and then we move over to Dmytro at the end.
Well, since we've really got the private sector here and present, I would wish for them to take the chance to become involved. The people of Ukraine are extraordinary, quite ingenious, quite so committed to their future. The resources, the natural resources within the country, the will of the government to really turn from east to west is so strong. And so I would encourage and wish for, our American businesses to become, I know it's far away, but become more involved in Ukraine. It's incredibly important to us in the United States, and to the world, and to our way of life, and to the kind of government and economy and humanity that we want to live. So thank you.
Thank you.
Gazprom is now a loss-making enterprise. The Russian business model is collapsing. Putin is ruining his country. And he's putting out feelers through China and Brazil to try to freeze this conflict, which means that he has already understood that he cannot achieve the original war aims, which was to conquer all of Ukraine and to bring Ukraine down to the level of Russian folklore. He now understands that. In another year or two, we might actually be able to restore international law and restore Ukraine's international borders. We just need to stay the course.
Well, thank you. When I was out of office, I was so frustrated about not being able to do anything for Ukraine. I actually loaded up a lorry from my local town and drove it to the Polish border to deliver supplies to Ukraine. And I think maybe odd to quote Gandhi, who was a pacifist when it comes to this, but you should act as if you want to deliver the change you want to see in the world. So everyone should ask, what can I do for Ukraine? If you're a business, can I invest in Ukraine? Can I at least visit Ukraine and have a look where I could invest? If you're an insurer, can I insure ships in the Black Sea? If you're a foreign minister, ask yourself, what countries can I win over to the cause of Ukraine? If you're a defense minister, have a look and see if you have any spare weapons you can give to Ukraine, and look at the permissions that you put on those weapons so we can make sure we hit Russian soldiers before they actually get into Ukraine. If you're involved in cultural industries or other things, think of what you can do to partner with Ukraine. Something Britain is working on now is a 100-year partnership with Ukraine on everything from twinning our towns to universities, to school visits, to trips, to cultural institutions, everything we can do. Let's be frank about this. This country, Ukraine, has chosen a path to join us in the Euro-Atlantic, in the West, with all that means for their economy, their society, their politics, and everything else. And we've got to support them in that choice, because Putin wants to stop them making that choice. So everyone should ask, what can I do for Ukraine? And if we all do that, there's no way we can't win.
I think it's important to be united, to work all together for growth of Ukraine. Italy is a country with a real economy, industry and agriculture. The private sector is strongly engaged in Ukraine. They want to invest in Ukraine, they want to work in Ukraine, they want to be present in the public procurement. I think the message coming from Ukraine is positive because your candidacy is helping, a candidacy as full member of the European Union, it's helping your country because it's a good message for inviting the private sector for investment in Ukraine. In many sectors. I underline the new investments in the mining sector is crucial for the reconstructions. We are ready also in the railway sector, because there are very important companies also today here work in this sector. But it's possible also to work in the space sector. If you want to have a big contribution for your growth and for your full membership in the European Union, we are ready for doing more. The private sector in Italy is very active, not only at big companies, but also, as I said, 4 million of small and medium-sized companies. They want to be present in Ukraine, also in food sector, for example, also in fashion sector. This is possible to work hard for your growth. It's possible also to organize a strong cooperation between different European and not only American companies for investing in your country. Also today, for paving the way for more investments in the next years, but working for peace now is possible also to work for, you will be part of the European market union. This is important for our companies, paving the way for the next years. Good luck.
Thank you.
Yes, Chancellor and yourself, you mentioned this phrase, it's in the people, and a story, a very quick story immediately popped up on my mind. In late 2022, I was walking my dog in the evening, and I ran into a young gentleman, 18, maybe 19 years old, and he said, "Wow, it's so cool, Minister is walking his dog in the evening." And we started chatting, and he told me, Ukraine will never recover from all this damage that was inflicted on us, and I just don't see a future here. So I will leave. And I said to him, recall what happened with Europe after Second World War. The damage was much worse, but Europe had the will and had a friend, the United States of America, to recover. And now you want to emigrate to Europe. Believe in recovery of Ukraine. We can recover and we will. And some months later, I ran into him again. He was still there. And I said, so you did not leave. And he said, I checked your words on internet, which is good. Young people never trust ministers, so they go on Wikipedia. And you were right. Europe was much worse damaged, and it recovered. I'm staying. Please remember, there are millions of Ukrainian men and women who hold up because they believe in recovery. And please act today to help their dream come true. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And by these encouraging words, be brave like a Ukrainian man, staying, investing, defending, believing in the future. I would like to leave you now with the upcoming discussion, how you could be brave like a Ukrainian to invest, to find a new business case in Ukraine. So, and one day in the future, we don't know when it will be, but that there will be one day where you could all say, I invested into Ukraine, and now we are celebrating the European Union together from Luhansk to Lisbon. Thank you very much, and thank you for being here on this panel with us today.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much to the foreign ministers for this very insightful panel. We're actually going to continue without a break. Quite on the contrary, there will be 3 back-to-back sessions taking place right now. There have been some very slight changes. Please revert to the apps to make sure you are completely up to date. And the following sessions, which I now have the great pleasure of introducing, is titled United in Recovery Towards a Free and Prosperous Ukraine. My name is Ali Aslan. I'm an international TV host and journalist, and I have the great pleasure of moderating this upcoming session. First up, as the speakers, you see we have added a few chairs and we have more speakers on this particular panel than on the subsequent ones. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists. First up, she's the German Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development. Delighted to welcome to the stage. Please welcome Svenja Schulze, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Minister Schulze. Great to have you with us. I believe you are right here. Next up, she is Ukraine's first Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Economic Development and Trade. Please welcome Yuliia Svyrydenko, ladies and gentlemen. Vice Prime Minister, great to have you with us. Please have a seat right here. Yes, thank you so much. Next up, he's going to speak on behalf of the United Nations. He's the administrator of the UNDP. Great to have him here on stage. Please welcome Achim Steiner, ladies and gentlemen. Nehmen Sie hier Platz, bitte. Also delighted to welcome to the stage the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Please welcome Odile Renaud-Bassot, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the World Bank Group, it is my great pleasure to welcome the World Bank's Managing Director for Operations. Please welcome Anna Bierde, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, we've been talking so much about Ukraine from the get-go. So I'm very, very delighted to welcome 2 mayors of prominent Ukrainian cities that have suffered the brunt of what has been happening since 2022. First up, he's the mayor of the 2nd largest Ukrainian city, Kharkiv. Please welcome Ihor Terekov, ladies and gentlemen. All the way in the back. Yeah. And also a town, obviously, that unfortunately suffered heavy damages and losses was the city of Irpin. And I'm very delighted to welcome the mayor of Irpin now to the stage. Please welcome Alexander Markushin, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mayor. Please take your seats. And as you can see, this is a spectacular panel that we have here, and there's much to talk about for obvious reasons. Once again, the session is titled United in Recovery Towards a Free and Prosperous Ukraine. But before we dive into the subject matter and dive into a discussion, Minister Schulze, I would like to kindly ask you to offer some preliminary remarks. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, 837 days, that is how long Ukraine has now been defending its freedom. And I would like to express my deepest respect to the people in Ukraine for their courage and determination to stand long in these difficult times. And my gratitude
because they are also defending the freedom of us all here in Europe. And during my visits to Ukraine, I have met many people. Each of them carries their own story with them, and often a lot of hope and optimism. And I have met many of who want to do their part in rebuilding a free Ukraine, such as Yana Stepanenko, who lost both legs in a bomb attack on Kramatorsk. 2 years on, she has now run the Boston Marathon on her new artificial legs. Or Tajani, who was forced to flee eastern Ukraine to the west of the country alone with her 3 children. She learned a new trade and to be able to feed herself and her family. To all of them, I wish to say, Germany stands firmly with Ukraine. We stand by you and are committed to advancing reconstruction. It is important to already start thinking about the future. Ukraine's desire for freedom and for resilience are its greatest asset in that process. And let me outline 3 pillars that I think are needed for reconstruction. First of all, support is required so that people's basic needs can be met despite the war. This includes medical services and infrastructure, which needs to be repaired or renewed. Germany's support, for example, efforts to protect the energy infrastructure against attacks and rebuild it where necessary. We are developing decentralized grids and renewable energies because that helps to increase energy security. And every power line we're repairing is also a connection with Europe. As we repair transmission lines, we are making sure that they are compatible with the European grid, and Ukraine is part of the European family. And secondly, social cohesion must be ensured. Local communities play a key role in strengthening social cohesion. They are the ones in charge of securing their basic needs. They coordinate and organize the repair of houses, streets, and schools. For their support, we initiate, together with our partners, the Coalition for Sustainable Municipalities. The coalition will make sure that communities have access to the funds they need and can rebuild their own administrative capacities. And that is why it is great to see that civil society and municipalities are extensively involved at the Ukraine Recovery Conference. The private sector and trade unions too are also very well represented today. The Recovery Forum, which we will open this afternoon, will provide a platform to link up of all these actors. Together with Yuliia Svyrydenko and my colleague Robert Habeck, I invite you all to join this opening. And thirdly, investments in the Ukraine economy is required. But what would the economy be without the people who keep it running? And that is why this afternoon we will be launching the Skill Alliance together with Ukraine and many others. The alliance is about targeted training initiatives in professions that Ukraine needed most now. A free and independent Ukraine needs doctors and psychologists, nurses, engineers, and electricians. And to this end, government, international organizations, and companies are working together in the alliance. The alliance is about 3 things: more skilled workers, closer networks, and a stronger focus on reconstruction. And here, it is especially important to put the focus on women. They are currently taking in many of the tasks that keep this country running. They fight tirelessly for reforms and for international support. And that is why I am committed to strengthen women's participation in reconstruction. And last but not least, small and medium-sized enterprises are the backbone of Ukraine's economy. And that is why this Ukraine Recovery Conference will be launching the SME Resilience Alliance. It will make it easier for small and medium-sized companies in Ukraine to access finance For instance, via the Business Development Fund, which provides long-term support through affordable loans and advisory services similar to Germany's development bank, the KfW. Thanks to this fund, around 40,000 SMEs have been able to exist on the Ukrainian market since 2022. They secure jobs and keep the economy running, and the SME Resilience Alliance built on these achievements to foster investments in a stable and economically prosperous future for Ukraine. And ladies and gentlemen, we are stronger together. Let us join forces to drive forward reconstruction. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to the German Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Svenja Schulze, for kicking off this session with such stark and unambiguous words. And once again, before we dive into the subject matter, I would also kindly like to ask the Ukrainian First Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Economic Development and Trade, Yuliia Svyrydenko, to offer her opening remarks. The floor is yours, Prime Minister.
Dear colleagues, dear friends, actually war changed everything, even the name of this conference. If there were no full-scale invasion in Ukraine, so it would be been 8 conference on the reforms. And we would discuss a very broad reforms agenda, but each bomb killed not only Ukrainians, and destroyed not only buildings. We also witnessing how this war destroyed our shared vision on modern state, what a social market economy is, what a climate-friendly industry and energy sector are. And 2 years ago at the conference in Lugano, this conference was renamed to the Conference of Recovery. And I think it's a good manifestation of our shared belief and enthusiasm that we won't give up. And just 2 examples, our macro-financial stability and restored maritime logistics are enough to understand that our build to rebuild our economy and develop our country does not disappear under shelling. Today and tomorrow, many examples of resilience will be showcased in the hall, how with your help we would rebuild bridges, sewing was carried out, children were protected in schools, water supply was preserved. But we understand that the reconstruction of Ukraine is already the largest project of 21st century, and the total cost of rebuilding would be not less than 500 billion over the next 10 years. But I would want also to pay attention to energy issue because I think it would be the main topic among these 2 days, and I will emphasize once again that Russia already destroyed half of our generation capacity. It's about 9 gigawatts. It's half of our installed capacity, and to understand the scale of this challenge, you may compare, for example, with Germany. So it would be enough to provide electricity to 11 million German citizens. So it's a huge challenge that we're facing, and in this area we have 4 priorities for this conference and in the short term. First, it's a rapid restoration where it's physically possible, and we critically need equipment from your decommissioned power plants and direct financial support. Second, we need political and technical decision to increase import of electricity up to 2.3 gigawatt. Second, the third, we need to plant up to 1 gigawatt of capacity this year and another 4 gigawatt over the next 2 years. European, especially German companies, are global tech leaders in this field, and we are signing the first contracts in this conference, but we also need export credit finance solution from your government and institution. And the fourth, we need to build a new energy system that will serve Ukraine and Europe for the next 50 years. And this requires commercial loans, this requires more active involvement of IFIs, DFIs, and export credit agency globally. And of course, to ensure reliable air defense for Ukraine, I would say it's a Geiber urgent task. We see that the direct development of economic recovery on the quality of air defense. Thanks to protection of our ports, we were able to increase the export volume, 13 million tons of cargo. It's almost pre-war level. So we understand that from economic perspective, recovery requires several things. First of all, is strengthen the macroeconomic foundation, and we are working closely with our partners to ensure and the macro-financial stability during the next few years up to 2027. Second, to accelerate economic recovery. This requires investment. That's why we're here discussing the possibility for the private sector. And the third one, strengthen the potential for growth. Reforms need to be completed by long-term investment and technology transfer commitments from partners. Talking about reforms, I just would give you the few words. So last week we presented a reform matrix. All measures we are implementing within partner assistance program. It includes 206 conditions and recommendations and 410 indicators that Ukraine will fulfill this year. I think that replacing the word reforms with the world recovery in this conference title means that we have acknowledged that all the reforms consolidated in the reform matrix are necessary but insufficient for faster economic growth. Analysis shows that reforms alone are not enough for economic growth. Not only factor that can drive long-term growth is investment. It's involvement of private sector. So that's why we're here. If Ukraine wants to have a chance to catch up with the EU countries in terms of GDP, we need investment or technology transfer of from 10 to 13 billion per year over the next 10 years. So this is a key answer for this conference and for my presence is here. We need investors now to come to Ukraine, not to wait until the war will be finished, because it's a prerequisite for the fast economic growth and for the upcoming victory. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the Ukrainian First Vice Prime Minister. Thank you for your remarks. And it's very clear from the makeup of this panel that so many stakeholders, so many international organizations, and of course, municipalities are represented here. So let's get them into our discussion. Achim Steiner, I would like to start with you. You are today here representing the United Nations on behalf of the United Nations. And of course, it is a very, very prominent, very relevant, very pertinent international organization in the context of the Ukrainian recovery process. Can you tell us briefly, what is the role of the UN in the reconstruction process? How do you engage?
Thank you very much, and let me also join others in thanking, through Svenja, Schulze, the Minister, the German government for hosting this conference. Indeed, it is a series of conferences, and I know you have just spoken, Deputy Prime Minister, about the challenges of translating vision and aspiration into very practical and operational realities. Let me begin by first of all saying the United Nations has been a partner to Ukraine, is a deeply engaged and invested partner right now, and is firmly committed, and this is the Secretary General's message, to the future of Ukraine. As we speak today, 3,000 UN staff in 24 different agencies and programs are working in Ukraine. They are supporting the humanitarian response, they are supporting the early recovery and reconstruction work, and they are engaged in also the longer term and systems reforms, and some of them the Deputy Prime Minister spoke to just now. I think at this very moment, to answer your question, we are focused first of all on the priorities that the Ukrainian government has set for itself. Imagine having not only millions of refugees leave your country, but also having millions of people being internally displaced. Still 3.7 million people are inside Ukraine, disrupted. Their ability to begin to earn a living again, to find a roof over their head. We have the mayor of Irpin here. I remember standing in Irpin and seeing how after the initial bombardments and destruction of the housing areas around Irpin, people were trying to find a place to go back to. The ability to remove rubble, to remove unexploded ordnance, to deal with demining. All these are aspects that we are working together with Ukraine at the moment. But also, and you've heard time and again this morning, energy infrastructure. I had the United Nations Development Programme. It was at the request of Ukraine that we sourced the first 2 auto transformers worldwide and delivered them, because each one of them could reconnect 500,000 people to electricity. But it is always between early recovery, immediate response, and the longer-term investments in what you have also described, a more resilient energy infrastructure, for the future. Let me also say, many of our UN agencies in the UN country team are also working with local ministries, local government, and local business leaders, whether it is helping to bring children back to school, by being able to repair schools, by operating health centers, by reconnecting citizens to the social welfare and social safety nets of the Ukraine. The bottom line for our engagement today is to both respond to the humanitarian crisis, but also to invest and be very proactive in helping Ukraine to function as a state at national, at local level, in order to have an economy continue to sustain Ukrainians. We often forget that 99% of business in Ukraine are in fact micro, small and medium-scale enterprises. Helping them costs virtually nothing, but can make all the difference between them giving up and leaving, or staying and rebuilding their business, earning a livelihood, creating jobs. So this is the spectrum of our engagement today, and in the last 2 years, we, with the support of many of you in this hall here, mobilized over $1 billion in investments through the United Nations. We hope that this year it will actually be $1 billion that we're able to mobilize in support of all these different areas for Ukrainians, for citizens, for the restarting of business, but also for the basic infrastructure that will allow you to sustain people in order to look to the future with hope and with dignity. And this remains our commitment. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed to Achim Steiner. Yes, please. For laying out the very firm commitment on the part of the UN and its various agencies in fostering the Ukrainian recovery process. Thank you so much for that. And we're jumping from the United Nations to yet another very important institution, namely the World Bank Group, of course. And Anja Birde, great to have you with us representing the World Bank Group here on this panel. Very early on, the World Bank Group mobilized support from different donors, especially supporting the government to maintain public services and to support the country's economic reforms. Could you elaborate a bit further on your institutions, on the World Bank's further plans to support Ukraine moving forward? Thank you.
Sure, thank you so much. And let me also add my gratitude and thanks to the government of Germany and to Minister Schulze for having us here and for hosting this very important conference. And also take this opportunity to really commend the government of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine for their resilience and bravery that we see each and every day. I'd like to, just like my colleague Achim, say Ukraine has been a really important client for the World Bank for so many years, and the World Bank has really remained very steadfast in its support to Ukraine before this terrible invasion by Russia, and of course also as Ukraine has now had to face the challenges of being at war. And since the day one of this war, the World Bank Group, which is the World Bank, IFC, and MIGA, combining public and private parts of the World Bank Group, has really come together to see what we can do to support. And I wanted to maybe just mention 3 ways that we have been working with Ukraine and we continue to work. And as you also asked, what comes next and how do we evolve? First and foremost, we discovered very early that one of the most important things to do when countries go into a crisis, a conflict, a war, is to make sure that services to its people can continue. So we put together with the government of Ukraine, a platform which we call Peace. And what it essentially does is provides budget support to the budget of Ukraine to maintain the essential services, whether it's teacher salaries, healthcare expenditures, government workers, internally displaced. Essentially, we started with 2 categories, and we have now ended up with over 10 categories of budget expenditures that we can provide support to. I want to really give a lot of credit to development partners who came on board and said this is a very useful vehicle. And through this operation and other operations since the war began, we've been able to mobilize $42 billion to Ukraine, of which we've dispersed about $38 billion. So very important to put together this platform that was able to channel World Bank funds, but also other development partners funds. The second is to invest in sectors. We've been seeing and hearing today the importance of the energy sector, but also transport sector. For us in the World Bank, what has been very important are the human development sectors. So again, health, education, and social safety nets. It's been very important to be able to work there. But also SMEs, something we also heard about today, how important it is, particularly for jobs and for growth. And the third area that we have kept a strong focus on is diagnostics. So together with the UN and the European Commission, and of course the government of Ukraine, we have published a series of damage and needs assessments. The last one came out in February, and that was the third one of its kind. And that was also referenced by the Chancellor, that puts the damage at $486 billion. That's the latest figure that we have. Others have been economic updates, very regularly coming out with an update on the economy and where we see the outlook for the economy. And the third most recent is a household survey that takes stock of the level of poverty in Ukraine. And this is something perhaps I want to draw attention to today, which is that we have seen 1.8 million additional people fall into poverty in Ukraine because of this war. And that makes 9 million poor people in Ukraine today, a very significant number. But I also want to emphasize that we estimate that about 3 million have avoided poverty thanks to international support and mobilization. Maybe just very quickly what we do next, because we're constantly having to evolve. We are looking to continue to support reforms, and we really were very happy to see the reform matrix that the government of Ukraine has released. And as many others have said, to be reforming in the midst of a war is no small deed. The second thing is to work on project preparation facility, and we also heard today about identifying bankable projects, prioritizing projects for the future. And last week, we also signed an MOU between the World Bank, IFC, government of Ukraine on housing finance. So it's very important to also continuously evolve and make sure that we're stepping up in areas that need support.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna Viade, and for laying out the very steadfast support on the part of the World Bank Group for Ukraine, the many sectors. I will revert to you, of course, in the second round. Thank you so much. Let me move, however, on to Odile Renaud-Bassot. Great to have you with us, the President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And from the beginning of the war, the EBRD's priority has been to keep the economy and the infrastructure in Ukraine running. What are some of your supports? What are some of the EBRD's priorities now to support Ukraine's economy today, particularly if we are looking at the severely damaged energy sector and municipalities?
So I would like to start also by thanking the German government for their hospitality and this very important conference, because I think it's really important to discuss, to exchange views, to exchange experience, and I think to build and to agree on priorities. So indeed, we've been very committed since the beginning of the war to continue our support to Ukraine for EBRD, which was created after the collapse of the Soviet Union to develop post-Soviet countries. This was, at the core of our history, at the core of our mandate. And as you mentioned, we focused on real economy because we are mainly a bank investing in the private sector. So, of course, military support is very important, budget support is very important, but it's also very important to keep the economy going, because at the end of the day, it's also generate taxes, create jobs, it's what allows people to stay in the country and continuing to support the military efforts. So we increased our investment in the war situation. We doubled what we invest each year. We invested up to now more than 4.2 billion, 4.3 billion euros, and in half of that last year was in the private sector, and half of that in the public sector to support key infrastructure. And we are going to sign in the margin of this conference commitment for new 1 billion. So. Very important. And as I was saying, two key big priorities keeping the infrastructure functioning. So we invested a lot already in electricity, in energy. Overall, our investment in this sector up to now has been 1.5 billion with different companies in the public sector, but also supporting private businesses through banks or directly. And what is very striking, I think, and the sign of the resilience is that business continues and investments, new investments are taking place, mostly from companies already in Ukraine who know the country and so forth, but they are deploying, developing new investment, relocating, and increasing their capacity and so forth, and we are trying to provide support for all of that. Energy remains a key challenge, and I think it has stepped up, and what we are doing is, as Anna was saying, we need to change and we need to adjust to what happens. Agility is, I think, one of the key issues. And what we are focusing now is how to focus more on distributed energy capacity, generation capacity. Last year, the challenge was more the distribution network. Now it's the generation capacity, and we have already heard a lot about that. And we signed last week with the Prime Minister an MOU on the 300 million financing for state-owned companies in order to support this generation distributed capacity. And what we want to do and we are working on, is to really use all the tools we have with our private sector clients, with financial institutions, and with the public sector to develop capacities. Municipalities will be a very important element in that respect, because a lot can be done in relation also with the heating system in a very distributed manner, which will be more, if the more you are distributed, the more you are protected against a Russian attack. And we already have a strong commitment with municipalities, around 1 billion of existing investment, and we are announcing a new package of 143 million, working with Lutz district, for example, on district heating, and other municipalities, either on water management, but also liquidity support for municipalities to help them, and it's the case with Lviv, Mykolaiv, hopefully Kharkiv, to help them to do the investments that are needed to face the current circumstances.
Yeah, thank you so much to Odile Renaud, so the president of the EBRD, for sharing the EBRD's efforts and keeping the Ukrainian infrastructure and economy running, particularly with a focus on municipalities, which brings me to, of course, the two mayors that we have here on stage. Thank you so much to both joining. Alexander Markushin, I would like to start with you. It goes without saying that much of Irpin, much of the city was damaged. And the question I have is, how's the situation today in Irpin?
Доброго дня. Я дуже дякую перше організаторам за цю вкрай важливу конференцію для України.
I too would like to thank the organizers of this important conference for hosting this conference. As far as Irpin is concerned, we are a leading city these days, leading as concerns construction and recovery. This is something we owe to Ukraine's efforts and the efforts of our international partner organizations. Over the last 2 years, we have carried out more than 200 successful projects. Thanks to the support from our government and thanks to the financial support from the civil-military administration of Kyiv, and thanks to the support from our partners all over the world. Let me give you a few examples. It's more than examples. We are talking fundamental principles here that allow us to do this job. In February 2020, Russia tried to reach Kyiv, and they crossed through Irpin. Irpin is the city most damaged in that part of the country. It is where kindergarten, schools, the critical infrastructure had been totally demolished and destroyed. We had no water, no gas, no electricity. We had no mobile links, no radio links. But the very first who came in to help us were the ICRC, the International Red Cross. Within 19 days, we were able to restore the water supply from Kyiv to Irpin. And Caritas and Red Cross was there, UNICEF were there too quickly. Over the period of 1.5 months, we succeeded in tackling the issue of water supply, wastewater treatment, got the gas and electricity running again, and the city was revived. We've received strong support from the GIZ and from Ukraine. They provided us with the first diesel generators and also the technology that we needed, which provided us with the opportunity to immediately begin the reconstruction process. What is the situation like today? We have a program of 7.5 billion euros for the reconstruction of the infrastructure. We're talking water lines here, about heating systems. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank the development program of the United Nations, UNDP, which helped us rebuild private houses. 150 houses were taken down, and the same happened to multi-story buildings, but we're still very busy in that regard. Much needs to be done. The Japanese company has provided technological equipment that allows us to take down these demolished houses. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, has also chipped in, and so does a bank from Germany, building up 3 multi-story buildings from scrap. The World Bank, too, is helping us. Our biggest hospital is being rebuilt with the help of the World Bank, and I would like to thank them most warmly. UNICEF has rebuilt the biggest secondary school. It was the biggest school on this globe. They invested 5 million euro, allowing children to attend school again, and another secondary school was also rebuilt. A kindergarten was rebuilt. 200 children are now able to attend this kindergarten. So these are but a few examples of the reconstruction that is ongoing. But I'm only, mentioning a small share of what is being done. If I may point out to the important principles I referred to, as I said, there are a number of important principles with regard to reconstruction. We have to be quick. The quality has to be high. And third, and that's the most important point, we have to be transparent. The process has to be transparent. Our partners are providing us with the necessary funding, and they want to know where the funds go. And we have tried to act in a way that allows our partners, our donors, to organize the bidding procedures, the tenders, so they themselves identify who should be responsible in situ to realize these projects. So there is zero risk involved for our partners. And I could give you many other examples. 90% of the reconstruction took place at the expense of our partners. We've organized everything. We drafted project plans. We prepared the necessary papers, the technical specifications. But it was the partners who shaped the process. Every individual little stone is important for us. What we continue to offer to our partners is to proceed in this way, to continue to pursue this approach. We identify projects, and they define and design the work that is to be done. In that way, we ensure the transparency that people rightly expect of us. The same goes for the United States. They've done so much to help us, but much more needs to be done. And I would like to use this opportunity to express my gratitude to our partners for this great support we've received.
To the Mayor of Irpin, Alexandra Markushin, also for pointing out the many goods that the institutions that are represented here on this panel are doing, that the impact that it's having on the ground. That must be very gratifying for each and every one of you to hear, and of course is motivation to keep the support up. Thank you so much. And I was also, while asking how the situation is on the ground, I was also looking at the mayor of Kharkiv, of course, Ihor Terekov, because the situation, of course, you're sharing the suffering, you're sharing the pain, you're sharing the trepidation on a daily basis. As the second largest Ukrainian city, Kharkiv, it's great to have you with us, Ihor. And aside from the question how the situation is in Kharkiv, I also want to ask you about the master plans play for reconstruction, which I believe you have presented yesterday here in Berlin. Tell us how the situation is on the ground and what role does the development of the master plan plays for reconstruction? Very much looking forward to your reply.
Доброго дня. Перш за все, я дуже вдячний уряду Німеччини за організацію цього заходу.
Thank you. Allow me to express my gratitude to the federal government for hosting this conference. And I would like to thank the Ukrainian government for supporting my city. Yes, indeed, this has been tremendously important for us to see all parties interact and helping us in keeping up the resistance. Now, as far as the situation in the city is concerned, it is as follows. We're in a war, and it is a brutal war. Of course, we're here to talk about recovery and reconstruction. Yes, of course, we need investment in that area. And of course, we have to put all our efforts and strength into ensuring that Ukraine is being rebuilt and can recover so as to allow it to become a stronger European country. However, we are at war. People are dying on a daily basis. Every day, in Kharkiv, people lose their lives. Yesterday, too, was no exception. We'd already arrived in Germany, and we felt safe and secure, whilst our city was under attack at the same time. We have had fatalities. We've got people who were wounded and houses that were affected, destroyed. According to the latest statistics published in May, we have had 76 such attacks from the air via Russia. 193 alarms were sounded in the city. Just imagine what this means. 20 times 24 hours of alarm. But regardless of these facts, Kharkiv is not giving in. Kharkiv continues to run, continues to work. Kharkiv is alive. Despite these facts that I've just described, our children attend school. Not because life is so beautiful. They have to go and attend their classes underground, in a bunker, in a shelter. We are trying to set up schools in the underground in order to provide children with the opportunity to learn. So this is not about a beautiful life that people are leading, but it's not nice for them to enter the underground when the alarm is being sounded. But again, this is an affirmation of what our president said earlier today. We need the most modern air defense conceivable, so as to allow the people to continue to live and to continue to live their lives. We're talking the lives of our people, about our children and about our women. The most important thing about this conference is that we address the issue of providing security for our people, despite the fact that the country is at war. We are aware of the fact that the winter will come. The next winter is almost on our doorstep, and our enemy has smashed our energy supply. All heating power plants have been destroyed. All of them. We have 0 kilowatt being generated in that way. No, 0 kilowatt of electricity. And this is why the government took the decision that we need a decentralization of our energy economy. We need a decentralization of our energy supply. We need your support here. We need the support of our partners in that regard. We need the support of the international organizations such as the World Bank, such as the EBRD. This is of vital importance for us. We're talking the lives of people here. We get like 20 degrees Celsius during winter. And without a heating system that works, without electricity, without water supply, people will not survive. They will not be able to survive under these circumstances. You have to be aware of that. We've drafted a roadmap. We worked on this roadmap with our government. Costs incurred by the government, costs incurred by the municipalities and the regional administrations. This, as I said, is a matter of survival for us. But as I said, Kharkiv is still alive. It continues to live. It assists our troops and soldiers. Our industry continues to be up and running, and I would like to thank you for your contribution. We have taken certain measures in cooperation with the federal government. We've abolished local taxation for the time being so as to allow our enterprises to have more income. And we will do whatever we can to ensure that the companies remain in Kharkiv and are able to continue their operations and to create jobs. Yesterday, I spoke with the representative of the foundation of Sir Norman Foster, a project that receives the support of the German government. We spoke about this when we met at the conference, Ukraine Recovery Conference in London. We drafted a step-by-step, a general plan that identifies the individual steps for our plan, for our future, the future of our city. The plan covers a period of 50 to 100 years. We're talking architecture here, reconstruction, creating an industrial park, business areas, areas marked for business operations, and areas into which investment is to go. Even whilst we're at war, we need to make these plans, and we plan to present them to the investors so that they can take a look at these plans and take the time to familiarize themselves with these plans, and for them to take the necessary decisions so as to see what they can do. We guarantee transparency and provide them with the opportunity to invest in Kharkiv, a heroic city. Thank you for your attention. Long live Ukraine.
Thank you so much, Mayor Terekov, for speaking so bluntly, so passionately about the situation there on the ground and what still needs to be done in order to move those communities forward. And as you can see, we don't have much time, but I want to get every one of you in here one more time. So I would kindly ask you to be as brief as possible so that we can wrap up somewhat in time, because Achim Steiner, we talked, the mayor talked, Mayor Terekov talked about the plan that they've laid out and about reaching and supporting the communities. Describe quickly the UN's contribution in this context.
Well, it goes across so many areas, but I maybe want to pick up on this desperation of the moment. You described it both very well. Things are destroyed, people are lost, they have lost their relatives. I remember in Irpin standing on the ruins of a family's home that was at that moment simply a matter of removing the rubble and making sure there are no landmines and unexploded ordnance. It was the home of a family of musicians, 3 generations. And the daughter came armed with a violin for our visit. Why do I want to share this example with you? Because to me, it speaks to this extraordinary spirit that when we talk about early recovery, reconstruction, sometimes it simply begins with the fact people care about what happened to you. They are ready to stand by you. You begin to have hope again. You begin to have courage again to think about what happens next. And I think this is what is so crucial. We then listen to many of the examples where across the UN spectrum, and you heard some of our agencies, funds and programs being quoted, we are there to help in an unconventional way, in a fast way, high quality way. And I think when I look to how a central government has to, in a sense, have an overall reconstruction, early recovery plan, but in the midst of a war, it is mayors as local leaders who are such inspirations also. I saw it also in Lviv, and this was another encounter I had where job creation was integral to a major hospital complex that now has to deal with literally thousands of people who are amputees. Young men, women and children, victims of war, their whole life rewritten. How do you combine a response to help them but also creating opportunities to make prosthetics and use local enterprise rather than importing them. I think this is the reality that you as mayors every day right now are anchors for, and we as partners have to be unconventional, fast, and committed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The UN, obviously a big player in the recovery and reconstruction process in Ukraine. We thank you for that, and we'll continue and monitor, of course, the situation as it develops. Odile Renaud-Bassot, also very quickly want to bring you in one more time, because you have been, the EBRD has been very steadfast and integral in reforming the public sector and state-owned enterprises in order to make them more attractive for private investments. Tell us about your priorities right now, moving forward, also perhaps in the context of Ukraine's Europe and EU aspirations.
Very quickly, first of all, I want to pay tribute about the work done by the government on the state-owned enterprise reform. It has been passed very recently. Yuliia Svyrydenko was at the core of the discussion. 8 years of work to get this law passed. And in a country in a war, being able to do such a reform, I think, is amazing and show once again the determination and the resilience. It also shows the very good cooperation between all IFIs, because it was with the support of the World Bank, OECD, IMF, and so forth, everybody joining forces in order to have this law. Continued reform of SOE, state-owned enterprise, quality of the governance, state ownership policies. This is very important because we see in a war situation how important these companies and their good management is in order to be able to develop, to deliver the key infrastructures that are so important for the country to be able to remain on its feet and to continue the fight. The second key priority for us will remain fight against corruption and improve, all the procurement processes and so forth. We've heard a lot about that. The mayor also mentioned that. But transparency, we work a lot with the Agency for Reconstruction on a plan, procurement training, and so forth, so as to ensure that the money we invest is well invested, and that's key for the credibility, the sustainability of the external support. And now, I think one additional, we talked about a lot of energy. Human capital is a key challenge moving ahead, because young people are mobilized, veterans are coming back with challenges. It's a challenge to reintegrate them in the workforce. So we are working on that. Skilling for women, retraining for people coming back from the war, and so forth. This will be a key priority for us moving forward.
Thank you so much indeed. And Anja Bjerde, I would also like to ask you one more time. We've been talking about the rapid damage and needs assessment, which your World Bank, obviously in very close cooperation with the Ukrainian government, the UN and the EU, has been working on and preparing. And you've identified almost $500 billion in needs as of last year's. Obviously, a conference like this is best suited and very well situated to ask you how Ukraine's partners can begin addressing these needs. $500 billion is a big amount. Would very much like to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. And maybe because there's been so much emphasis on the private sector, I'll just focus a few observations on how we see the private sector play into this. So of the 486 billion, which is a 10-year reconstruction needs assessment, we actually believe up to about a third could be mobilized and met by the private sector under the right circumstances in terms of business environment, which has to do with Ukraine's continued focus on reforms. Secondly, continuing to think creatively about finance, and here we have seen a big response by using what we call blended finance, so bringing in some soft concessionary finance together with commercial finance. And thirdly, what I think has been very helpful is when countries help international companies go in by backing with guarantees. And I really want to acknowledge what Germany's done in this regard, because this is exactly what helps international companies that were present in Ukraine before the war come in and bring new money to Ukraine by having these guarantees. The one thing I want to call attention to today is the role of human capital. What we hear from companies, whether they're domestic or international, is that Ukraine has a huge endowment when it comes to human capital, but it needs to continue to be invested in terms of training, skills, equipment. And I'm very happy to launch that we will actually be looking to put in place a human capital accelerator, if you will, to be able to put even more training and support to young people in Ukraine, to people coming back to Ukraine, and also the very important point on female labor force participation.
No, thank you. I think that deserves a round of applause indeed. Thank you, Anna, also for pointing out the very crucial role of the private sector in this context. Mayor Markushin, let me also turn one final time to you. Of course, we know that due to the ramifications and consequences of the war, there is a shortage of skilled workers in Ukraine, but your city in particular. Very briefly, how are you dealing with the shortage of skilled workers?
Да, це велика проблема. На сьогодні не тільки в Ірпіні, а і в Україні нестача робочих рук, бо дуже багато хлопців.
Well, there is a shortage of skilled workers, of course. A lot of young men went to war to defend the country, and now we're doing what we can to involve the young men and the veterans. We're giving them work, we're helping our women to learn new trades, to retrain, especially in jobs where mainly men worked before the war. Now, we're working on a project together with the EU, and we will train highly skilled workers. It is true, highly qualified workers are a real problem. We have a brain drain. A lot emigrated, left Ukraine, or they joined the war, they went to the front. And we hope to train and upskill people in our communities. Now, I'd like to tell you a bit about the situation on the front line. When I started my trip to this conference, the customs officials in Germany asked me, "Oh, you're going to the Ukraine Recovery Conference? Shouldn't one first win the war and push out the enemy before starting reconstruction?" I said, no. A lot of people fled the country to Germany. If they come back, they have to live somewhere. They have to find a job. Kids in Ukraine need schools, just like German kids. They need to go to school. We need to rebuild Ukraine. Over the last 80 years, Ukraine has been fighting the biggest war in Europe. Russian terrorists are destroying our schools, our hospitals, our kindergarten. The terrorists are killing women, elderly people, and children. So we have to do what we can to succeed in this war. Live Ukraine.
I think you gave the best response to the customs official, something that customs officer, and it's been reiterated many, many times, the recovery process cannot start or cannot wait until the war is over. It has to start now, and the Ukraine Recovery Conference is obviously a very, very important element in that. I want to also bring Mayor Terekov in one more time. We are surrounded here on this panel by institutions who are helping Ukraine keep the economy running. How is the URC, how's the Ukraine Recovery Conference helping in keeping the economy running in Kharkiv and the institutions that are represented here on this very stage, Mayor?
Ну, перш за все, я теж підтримую цю тезу, що сказав мій колега, що сказала...
Well, as my colleague said, I can only agree with what he said and also with what Yuliia Svyrydenko said. We cannot wait. People need reconstruction as quickly as possible. On the one hand, a lot of people lost their homes, their houses. They have no roof over their head. And when we talk about Kharkiv, 150,000 people in the city of Kharkiv have lost their homes. So they have no home. Their homes have been destroyed. And this is really a key point. Then there's something else. When we look at housing, there is, of course, also the emotional component. People see that reconstruction is underway, that houses are being built, that people are going to work. That is a motivation for people. It is emotional support. People want to lead a normal life. They want to work. Despite what is happening in our Kharkiv, we are engaging in reconstruction. We are using our own funds and resources. We are using funds from the Ukrainian government, and we're being supported by international partners. A lot of foundations are supporting us, and organizations like the UN, UNICEF are actively working together with us. They're all there, and they're not differentiating because of religions or faith. We would like to do as much reconstruction as quickly as possible, but of course things take time. Now, to come back to air defense, we had several cases where we rebuilt objects and a new missile destroyed the objects, and we had to rebuild them again. So we need to continue to do that. And I'm very grateful for the support we're getting from international organizations and foundations. Thank you for supporting reconstruction.
From the get-go. So I would kindly bring just for a couple of minutes Minister Schulze and obviously Minister Svyrydenko, just a couple of minutes. We are here at the Ukraine Recovery Conference. Your government has been rightfully praised for this initiative. What are your hopes? What do you hope to come away with after these 2 days?
I hope that we can help to manage the complexity, because seeing that everything needs to be delivered at the same time everywhere. On the local level, we see that there are differences, that there are different needs in Irpin and in Kharkiv. And dealing with that is meaning that you need agility and that you need to bring that in the right balance. And with this Berlin dimension, so that we talk about the human factor, about business and private sector, about the municipalities and their role, and about the way to the EU. I hope that that helps to bring this agility in the right ways to rebuild Ukraine, and seeing how important the local level is. I think this panel showed that again. We need to keep in mind the local dimension, and building this coalition for sustainable municipalities here on this conference, I think that is an important topic, because they need at the end to deliver, they need to manage that, and we all need to help to rebuild, and together we are stronger. That is what we can take away also here.
Together we are stronger indeed, and thanks to you and your government's efforts in making that happen. Minister Svyrydenko, you're going to get the last 60 seconds also to reiterate and answer the question about your hopes and expectations of this conference.
I think that this panel actually reminds once again that the biggest and the most valuable resources in our country are our people. And with this conference, we want to use the deliveries for this conference to start the reconstruction, because we need, first of all, to provide the proper livelihood conditions for those who are staying within the country. And also we need to show the very clear signal for Ukrainians living abroad that we are creating incentives for them to return back home. So that's why we're not able to wait until the war will be finished. We need to make a reconstruction now. I agree absolutely with Igor Terechov that we need, like the President today is in his speech emphasized several times, we need anti-missile system, we need air defense systems. And if you would ask what can bring the boost of economic growth, I would say air defense system that can protect industrial zones, that can protect cities, that can protect our citizens. And why it's so important to keep working, keep fighting and thinking about investment, because the war is lasting, and it means that just based on the allocation within the country, we can finance this war. All macro-financial aid goes for covering the social expenditure. All taxes, revenues that we allocate within the country can be spent for the war issues. That's why we keep fighting, not only for our own territory, but we keep fighting for the common values, for democracy. So that's why I think it's the right time for foreign investors to look deeply at the country with, as I said, very valuable resources, people, human resources, and to open the opportunity for themselves and to invest right now.
Yeah, thank you so much. Clearly, your message, I think, has been heard loud and clear here in this room. Ladies and gentlemen, united in recovery towards a free and prosperous Ukraine. I think this panel has done a marvelous job in laying out what has already been established, contributed, and achieved. But of course, much more importantly, what still remains to be done, which is not insignificant considering your valuable statements. Thank you so much to our valuable panelists. This is your applause. Much appreciated. And ladies and gentlemen, without a break, we are actually diving right into the next subject matter. You can actually stay right here, First Vice Prime Minister, because we're diving from one subject matter to another to sort of make up for lost time. And as soon as the stage has been cleared, I'm very delighted to welcome our next set of speakers here on stage. I see some photos are still being taken. And if I could kindly ask the speakers to slowly exit the stage, because there's actually going to be another session right afterwards without a break, which is titled Perspectives for Economic Recovery to Promote a Strong and Sustainable Economy for Ukraine. Thank you so much to the speakers of this session. Gentlemen, if I could kindly ask you, just to not to be misunderstood, we're actually in the process of starting the very next panel. And for that, it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage. I haven't seen him yet quite, but I'm sure he's here in the audience. The German Vice Minister and Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Robert Habeck. It's great to have you. And the First Vice Prime Minister, please have a seat, Minister. Yes, we're arranging a bit. Also on this panel, great to have him with us, as always, the Secretary General of the OECD. Please welcome Matthias Cormann, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. And last but certainly not least, the Chair of the Business Advisory Council and President and CEO of Siemens Energy AG, Dr. Christian Bruch, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, Mr. Cormann. It's great to have you with us. I think so sorry. I think, yes. Please take the far left and, no, that's okay. I'm moving in the middle. It's just so happened that we've had 8 speakers for the last one. We are reducing it a bit. Now, not much time, but great to have you with us, Vice Chancellor, Minister of Economy. Always great to see you, great to have you back. We don't have much time, but I do want to give you a chance. We're talking here about the perspectives for the economic recovery of Ukraine. I want to give you a chance to have your remarks, and I'm happy to pass you the microphone.
Well, I take yours. Well, thank you very much, and dear colleagues from all over Europe and maybe the world, thanks for coming to Berlin. You just said it. I think the President Zelensky is now driving to the parliament, and if someone is giving me a sign, then I have to leave the stage and be there due to protocol.
Yes.
But we will see what's going to happen now. First of all, let me start with a personal remark or an anecdote, if you may say so. In the beginning of the war that Russia's invasion on Ukraine, I was sometimes listening to the BBC podcast Ukrainecast. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Then after a long period, yesterday or the day before yesterday, I listened to it once again, and by coincidence, I listened to a young soldier from your country I heard 2 years ago when he was 19 and volunteered to go to the front. And I remember that he was, you can't say enthusiastic, but full of willingness fighting for your country. Now, after 2 years' time, he said, I have never expected that this war would last so long. I've lost my comrades. Death is now something I'm used to. And he was searching for the words because the horror of the war after 2.5, 3 years of war was, you could feel it and hear it in his voice. And I'm saying that because I have 4 sons of my own. They have the same age now. He's now 21, and he has lived and suffered in the time of one's life where freedom and exploring the world and having an easy life and making friends and making love and whatever that is the core and the sense of being young. And now he's an experienced soldier, having killed his enemies, having seen how loss and death is his normal companion, actually. So, and I listened to this Ukrainecast, and it made me once again clear that this conference, the recovery conference, is not just an ordinary conference. And in a minute we start talking about energy, and we start talking about business opportunities and the recovery of Ukraine. And you heard the speeches of Olaf Scholz and President Zelensky and Ursula von der Leyen. And I tend to hear the words energy and business and trade and opportunity and funds and investment guarantees and so on, as in so many other conferences. But this is not Davos, and this is not another business conference. This is a conference about a country at war, and country at war means people are dying in the moment we're having this conference here. So with everything we try to solve, and supplying the cities with energy and developing business opportunities for you and giving the Ukrainians hope that their country will thrive again after this period, I think we should not forget, at least for me, this was a reminder that this is something. This is historic, and this is a historical mission. And if we fail to supply Ukraine, we not only betray freedom and let your country alone, we also betray the young soldier. I think Mishka was his name, and that was just a personal remark. So this is for me personally, and I think for everyone in the German government and everyone here in this conference, a very, very it is dear to our heart, and it must be, and we should not forget it. So having said that, to the item of this panel discussion, last year we have done, as the German government, something we have never done before. We have opened our investment guarantee programs for Ukraine. Never done before means normally this investment guarantee is working like an insurance. The companies that want to go under the umbrella of investment guarantees, they pay a little fee, and if something's going to happen to the fabrication, to whatever investment they are doing, the German state pays them out. For countries at war, it would be unreasonable to do an investment guarantee program, because the risk that something's going to happen is the daily risk. So a missile hits your fabrication, then it's destroyed and we have to pay. This is not a good business model for the German state. We have done it with tremendous success. The Chancellor mentioned it. The investments from German companies to Ukraine were number one of all investments worldwide, the sheer number. And the amount of investments was the 5th highest number. So I'm telling you the story because it's so easy, and I recommend it to all the other governments and partners to do something of the same. There's a huge interest from business companies going to Ukraine because there's a skilled workforce, there's a lot of space. I think, Yuliia, with due respect and a great compliment, you have done a lot about fighting corruption. And the perspective is becoming a full-scale member of the European Union, being part of the single market. So going to Ukraine, investing now, is a business opportunity. Here's a business model. The only thing that has to be solved is, for a state at war, that you need a bridge or some framework, a guarantee framework. And not to talk too long, this is what we have done in 2023, and we see in 2024 the request, the demand for investment is still there. It is ongoing, so the success story is going on, and maybe we can also, with a dark sky of the horizon for the country at war, with so many people are dying, we can, I don't know, open up the sky a little bit, or the horizon a little bit, and make some light shine to Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. Thank you indeed, Minister Habeck, for your initial statements and making clear this is not just another regular business conference, economic conference. Very clearly, based on your words, this is also weighing heavily on your soul. This has been a burden not just for Ukraine, but its partners as well. And as you pointed out, you have to rush to the parliament to follow President Zelensky's speech. So we will finish in 18 minutes' time, punctually, rain or shine. No matter what happens. Yes, of course, you as well, Minister Svyrydenko. We've already had the pleasure of listening to you in the previous panel, but I want to give you a chance nonetheless to once again obviously come in, because we're talking about how to promote a strong and sustainable economy for your country. I would like for you to elaborate on the remarks you've made in the previous panel.
Robert just mentioned about a few tools that German government launched.
Take this mic. The one is
Yeah, we're sharing the mic. No worries. This is all about sharing here at the conference.
Let's try this. So Robert just mentioned about few financial instruments that have been launched by the German government last year, and I would say that these united efforts, they yield in very concrete results. During the first year of large-scale invasion, economy dropped 30%. Last year, 5% growth. This year, we expect that we also will have growth at least 3.5, 3.6%. Actually, at the beginning of the year, we even expect that it would be more. But because of the attacks on energy grid, we should reconsider this macroeconomic forecast. But it means that actually investors, despite of the fact of war, they come to the country, they are setting up businesses. FDI last year was $4.2 billion at even more than in relatively peace years, 2016 and 17. And I think it's also a good signal for our partners that Ukraine, it's not only about the nation, it's about businesses itself. And I absolutely agree that this conference, it's not all about just economic issue, it's about the numbers or projects in energy, in renewables, green metallurgy, IT, logistics, but it's about European future as well. And we, during this conference today, once again, feeling ourselves like part of the European family, and we really expect that the negotiation would start by the end of this year, and we become even closer. So that's why I just would like to emphasize once again that we, like a government, want to be more self-sufficient, and there are a few steps we want to implement in the short term to be so. We want to be able to defend ourselves, so we want to produce weapons within our country, and we're very grateful for German cooperation in this area. We want to get frozen Russian assets because we truly believe that Russia should pay. And we expect for decision during the G7 meeting. Also, we expect that we will be able to expand logistics, and we succeed a lot. During the last year, 13 million tons of goods, it's export volume of April. It's almost pre-war volume. Also, we are focusing on incentivize and on creating conditions for Ukrainians to return back, because, as I said, the previous panel is the most valuable resources of our country, and of course attract investment and to set up different financial tools together with partners to incentivize investors to come to the country despite the fact of war. And we have identified several sectors in Ukraine facility plan. It's energy sector, agri-processing, IT, logistics. So we incentivize our investors, local and foreign, to come to the country by setting up different types of tools, like war risk insurance, like in industrial parks, like refunding for the connectivity. So we're also providing our reforms. As I mentioned, 200 indicators right now are on the list. So we are like a government, also make our homework, and we're implementing different types of structural reforms and build stronger institutions. So that's why I think it's a right time to invest to our country, and in economic sense, in political sense, and for those ones that are looking to the future, I think it's the right time to discuss it within this conference.
Thank you so much, Minister. This is the right time to invest in Ukraine politically, but also economically, which brings me, of course, to the Secretary General of the OECD. Always great to see you, Matthias Cormann. It's great to have you with us. You just listened to both the German minister as well as the Ukrainian minister, of course, talk about how to move the Ukrainian recovery process forward. And the OECD's role here is not insignificant. I was wondering what you would see as the main reform necessities and challenges moving forward from the OECD's perspective.
Well, thank you very much, Ali, Vice Chancellor, Deputy Prime Minister, Dr. Bruch. Great to be here. I'll try and be really succinct. The first point I would like to make is that in incredibly difficult circumstances, Ukraine's economy has actually proven to be remarkably resilient. After the 29% contraction of its economy in 2022, we saw growth of above 5%. Last year, we see continuing growth of 2.5% this year, and we expect that to strengthen to 4.5% next year. That should give all of us a lot of confidence about what would be possible in better circumstances into the future. In particular, given the very strong commitment by the government in Ukraine and by the Ukrainian people to pursue a reform agenda, an ambitious reform agenda, to align Ukraine's legislation, policies and practices with international best standards. And it's in that space, of course, that the OECD is very active together with the government of Ukraine. We've established a 4-year OECD Ukraine country program, which systematically across the broad public policy spectrum will support an ambitious structural reform agenda. And of course, we're focusing on helping to optimize the economic recovery opportunities moving forward. Of course, Ukraine has already made pretty significant progress on improving public sector effectiveness, the business environment, and the rule of law, and it will be important to continue with that reform agenda. And we're providing support to Ukraine, in particular, with a whole series of policy reviews on public governance, competition, environment and waste management, infrastructure, education, statistical and tax policy, and other areas. And across all of these areas, we assess Ukraine's current legislation, policies and practices, and we make recommendations on how Ukraine can best align with OECD standards and best practices. And we've recently also started work on the justice review, which will help Ukraine to enhance the independence and transparency and integrity and efficiency of the judiciary, again based on OECD standards and best practices, and we have initiated a major economic survey of Ukraine. Just going through this very quickly, one of the big challenges challenges that Ukraine has, despite its continuing economic resilience, is the very significant fiscal deficit, 20% as a share of GDP last year, 19% as a share of GDP this year still expected, and of course relying very significantly on international financing support. And so we are providing support focused on boosting domestic resource mobilization as well as enhancing public sector efficiency. We're also, of course, focusing on enhancing the business and investment environment with a view to support reconstruction and recovery over the medium and long term, with a particular focus on the fight against corruption, to foster a level playing field for business and indeed to safeguard public integrity. Ukraine has become a participant of our working group on bribery last year as part of the process of formally joining the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention. I mean, that involves a whole range of lifting of policies and practices to align with international best practice, and that work will continue. And we've also, as was previously mentioned, supported Ukraine's reforms when it comes to the governance of state-owned enterprises. I know that time is running, but let me just say, I mean, you know, obviously number one priority is bringing back a just and lasting peace for Ukraine. But beyond that, I think that the work that we're all doing together makes me optimistic about the economic prospects of Ukraine moving forward.
Thank you so much, Matthias Cormann, for not just being here, but also laying out the OECD's efforts in promoting Ukraine's economy moving forward. Christian Bruch, it's great to have you with us. The time is ticking mercilessly. You can see it, I can see it. Therefore, very, very briefly, I know you're obviously not just the CEO and president of Siemens Energy, but you're also the chairperson of the newly launched Business Advisory Council. And I would like to give you a couple of minutes to talk about the work and goals of the Business Advisory Council. Christian Bruch.
Thank you very much. I will try to do this very briefly, and maybe let me say what it actually is, the Business Advisory Council. It comprises of business representatives of the different donor countries and also of Ukrainian business people. By definition, this is very diverse in terms of the segments which are presented. I represent energy, we have retail, we have finance, we have all different type of industries. And these are business people who are before the war, now during the war, active in the country already anyway, and who have employees in the country, who have business relationship with Ukrainian companies, and obviously are interested to support and build up the Ukrainian economy. The main task of this Business Advisory Council will be to advise the donor countries, so the MCECP, with the support and recovery actions to build up business. However, we are all aware there are certain absolutely urgent short-term needs, like rebuilding the energy infrastructure. Obviously on the defense side there will be urgent needs, and there are certain midterm potentials, and we are trying obviously to combine these different things, because at the end the business, apart from any donations, has to have a business case to make private capital flow into the country and to make it work. So there are boundary conditions which have to be clarified. It has to be clarified what are the security risks, how do we judge on it, how do we make capital flow, how do we get people, which is the biggest constraint in the country at the moment, the human resource. And we are trying to flag up on very specific examples what could be done and can be done from a short-term perspective and a mid-term perspective, and to give advice as good as possible really to the different countries, and hopefully getting tangible results out of it.
Thank you so much indeed for laying out the mission and goals of the newly launched Business Advisory Council. It goes without saying that not just for you, but everyone else here on this panel, I would have loved to dive into an engaging conversation, follow up, but we fully understand, of course, President Zelensky is about to give a speech in the German parliament, and it is logical and necessary that both the Vice Chancellor Robert Habeck, but also you, of course, Mr. Svyrydenko, should and have to be present there. Suffice to say, summing up, everyone's on board, everyone's efforts are very much in line and in full force when it comes to promoting a strong and sustainable economy for Ukraine. Vice Chancellor, Minister Svyrydenko, Christian Bruch, Matthias Cormann, thank you so much for your input. This is your applause. Much appreciated. And thank you, Vice Chancellor. As always, Matthias, great to see you, Minister. This was a bit of an express session, but I think it was needed in order to make up some more time, because believe it or not, still no break. There's another highlight coming right now, and we are going to speak about the framework and conditions for economic growth and resilience, and we have another fantastic panel for you here on this session aligned. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage. I'm going to get a quick sign here. So, ladies and gentlemen, first up we have from the Ministry of Finance, State Secretary Heiko Thoms. Please give him a warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me, Heiko Thoms. And we have, I know, I think we are mixing up. First of all, thank you so much. You've right on board without having even had to call your name. The Ukrainian Minister of Finance, of course, Minister Marchenko, great to have you with us. Thank you so much. This is your applause. It's great. Please come and join me. And there he is. There is your counterpart, State Secretary. Please, to my left, or have a seat. At this point, we're just rolling with it. We're having also the President of the European Investment Bank here, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome Nadia Calviño is here, is not here yet. Delay. Well, I fully understand. Well, let's hope we can get her here. Do we have the former US Secretary of State here? As you can see, we're improvising and making this up as we go. Suffice to say, I already have, there you go. We have the 70th US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is here with us, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to have you with us. Please have a seat. And you know, without further ado, why don't we just get started? There's been some changes here due to President Zelensky's speech here at the German Parliament. Yes, of course. And we're still missing the CEO of the Deutsche Bank. There he is, Christian Sewing, ladies and gentlemen. Please, Mr. Sewing, if you could come here. And if we have too many chairs, perhaps we can also, there you go. We're missing one more person. And it's great to have you with us. Obviously, the CEO of Deutsche Bank, Christian Sewing, thank you so much for joining us. We're still missing the President of the European Investment Bank, who I'm sure will join us just a bit. But I suggest we go right ahead. And obviously, Minister Marchenko, first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for being in Berlin, taking part in the very, very important Ukraine Recovery Conference. I want to give you a chance, first of all, for some opening remarks. The subject matter is, of course, as it has been from the get-go, from this very morning, how to move the recovery process in Ukraine forward. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Good. It's a great pleasure to be here, because for Ukraine it's an important event. I believe, first of all, we should be grateful for organizer of this event, which help us to gather together all necessary people, specifically for business, to help to understand how to incentivize business incentive in Ukraine, because it's our major goal for this conference to create necessary grounds for business to business contacts, for possible to sign in some memorandums or future investment in Ukraine, because it's our very clear goal that we would like to have business to operate in Ukraine, invest in Ukraine, for prosperity, people of Ukraine, and prosperity Europe. Because I believe the joint interest of Europe to take part, to care of Ukraine as a possible future very good destination for investment. And now we should create necessary ground for safety. And President Zelensky mentioned that it's quite necessary before thinking about reconstruction to think about security. Air defense system is very necessary and very good solution. And as a Minister of Finance, I care about taxes more than anything else. And of course, I would like to have our budget balanced. But it's midterm perspective. Now it's impossible, I believe. And again, the fact that we are here, the fact we have macro stability in Ukraine, in May, inflation in Ukraine was 3.3%. We also managed to collect 35% more revenues in comparison with 5 months last year. It means that, generally speaking, the fact we have macro stability, the fact we have been able to collect necessary revenues, it's also a good signal for business to think about Ukraine. But again, a good explanation that it's support of our partners. And again, to my final statement, I am so grateful for joint support of G7 nations that we have been able to survive during this very harsh period. I constantly repeating this. We need your support and we rely on you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Minister Marchenko. And I think the support, and hopefully you have felt the support since this morning, very much so, from all stakeholders and speakers here on this stage, but obviously also beyond. State Secretary Toms, great to have you with us. We fully understand that Minister Christian Lindner had to rush off to the German Parliament for the speech of President Zelensky, but also, of course, you are here to represent the German Ministry of Finance and would like to hear your opening remarks.
Well, let me just say very briefly that first and foremost, the signal from this conference is that Germany will continue to support Ukraine as long as it takes and with whatever means it takes. We're committed to this. This is a substantial financial burden, clearly. But let's not forget that while we pay with our resources, Ukrainians are paying with their lives to defend their freedom and also to defend our freedom. Let me say, nationally, we have already contributed 34 billion euros to Ukraine. We are now having a new package from the EU side, another 50 billion to meet the financing needs until the end of 27. That's in combination with the US package of $61 billion. That's a very strong signal. Also, it's a strong signal that we have managed to arrange the financial flows from the interest generated by the immobilized Russian assets now within the EU framework. So the EU has done its homework on this. We have shown some leadership also within the G7 group that we are now able to let these financial flows go to the benefit of Ukraine right away. And we are also now, you know that at this point in time in the G7 framework, working on ways to leverage and front load those financial flows from the interest generated from the immobilized Russian assets furthermore. So that's another strong signal that we're committed to meet Ukraine's finance needs also in the future.
Thank you so much also to State Secretary Toms for your initial remarks at this particular point. Also a very warm welcome, of course, to the EIB's president. Great to have you with us, Ms. Calvino. I'm going to come to you in just a moment, but if you allow me, Minister Marchenko, just a very quick follow-up question perhaps, because the previous panel and the statements before have obviously been talking about at the end of the day, the coordination process, which is not going to be an easy task with so many stakeholders involved. I was wondering, how do you coordinate that financial support from donors and all the stakeholders coming together at once?
First of all, yesterday we gathered our multi-donor coordination platform. It was we meeting on a constant basis once per 2 months, once per 3 months. It helped us to better coordinate our efforts on our budget needs. It helps us to coordinate in reconstruction needs as well as reforms. So it's a very important venue when we gather together all G7 nations as well as other well-represented countries like Sweden, Netherlands, Norway, which contributed for Ukraine's prosperity, South Korea. And it helped us to generate a very impactful decision because we have secretariat in place. It's not something like we would like to have. We like Rammstein, for example, because in Rammstein there are a lot of military people involved. They can better decide logistics of military supplies. But I believe that we're in a good way forward. And this level of coordination can help us to get necessary attention for all G7 nations and to prepare and provide necessary information from within Ukraine. What's our great needs? What's our potential for mobilization? What our restrictions? What our obstacles? How we can resolve it? And it's very important discussions we held. And I believe that in future we can manage this platform in a constant basis, and it helps us to get all the resources and all support which we seeking for.
Thank you so much. And State Secretary Thomas, also very quick follow-up. You've talked about your steadfast support and the financial support that your country has delivered and will continue to deliver. I wonder, how has financial support for Ukraine evolved over time? Perhaps you can briefly speak to that. Have there been some involvements, the process that you've been going through, I'm sure has been its ups and downs. I was wondering what you...
Well, I think for the moment it's really ups, because with the package we have seen from the US side and also the 50 billion that we have mobilized only for the next 3 years also on the EU level, that's a significant increase. Also, what I talked about, the interest that we are taking from the immobilized Russian assets will potentially have an impact of another 50 billion that we can front load. That's significant numbers, so the trend in this respect is positive. But let me say the point which is most important to us, that in the end, of course, when it comes to the recovery, but also before, what we need to do is really mobilize also private capital for the reconstruction of Ukraine. We're very happy that Christian Sewing is on that panel tonight, and he will certainly speak about that later on. But clearly, when it comes to rebuilding Ukraine, even in this phase, what needs to be done is mobilize more private capital, more private resources. In the end, the financing needs for Ukraine are huge, and I believe that 90% in the end will have to come from the private sector.
Thank you so much indeed. Let me turn to EIB President Calvino. It's great to have you with us. Obviously, the European Investment Bank, a major player, an important player in the context of Ukraine's recovery process. I'd like to hear your short opening remarks and then have a quick follow-up.
Yes, well, good afternoon. I apologize that due to the change of the timing, I had to run to wrap up also some signatures, you know.
No apologies necessary.
This event is all about delivery, concrete results on the ground. So we were also wrapping up signatures and statements. And as I was delivering those remarks, I was thinking that a couple of months ago, Serhiy Marchenko, we worked together with Prime Minister Shmyhal, and we had a couple of meetings in Luxembourg, also in Washington, where we talked about prioritization, coordination that you were referring to, and we also agreed that we would accelerate the deployment of projects on the ground. And I was thinking today how proud I am that we are really walking the talk and we are delivering on our commitments. We have signed 3, 4 actually very important agreements today. First, to mobilize support to the private sector, to SMEs in Ukraine, mobilizing more than 1 billion euros in investment through the financial sector. Secondly, to repair infrastructures in the key Ukrainian cities. And here we're talking about schools, kindergartens, hospitals, houses, water supply that has been damaged by the war. Thirdly, we are also agreeing to extend to Ukraine the flagship advisory service of the European Union. That's known as JASPERS. And all the countries that have gone through the accession process and have joined the European Union know very well that JASPERS is the flagship program to support the technical assistance, the governance and capacities of the government in joining the European Union. And finally, we've signed an agreement with a memorandum of understanding with the German government also to support the deployment of renewables in Ukraine. So it's not only about building, but building back better and really having a sustainable reconstruction in the country. On top of that, here in this conference, we are able to communicate to our Ukrainian partners that we have already adopted a number of agreements to recover and repair the railway infrastructures, the border crossings to the EU, the metros and trams in Kiev and Lviv, the key cities. We are also working on a pan-European export guarantee, and of course, all these projects will be deployed on the basis of the 50 billion EU guarantee program that Heiko Toms, the Secretary of State, was referring to. So my thought, is how we are really delivering on the ground and how we're doing it together. Because these signatures are the result of a very close partnership, friendship, I would say brotherhood and sisterhood, if I may, with the Ukrainian government. We work hand in hand on a daily basis to coordinate our actions with the national member states, Germany and others. With the other European institutions, we could not deliver these without the guarantees and mandates from the European budget. And finally, with the private sector, the banks and the companies that are starting to see that recovery for Ukraine is not a matter for the future, but a matter of now.
Yeah, it's not an issue for the future. It is, of course, but more importantly, it has to start now. It has to be implemented now. Thank you so much. Before I turn to the distinguished business section to my left here, let me also very quickly follow up, Nadia Calviño. You've talked about the chances, of course, and the opportunities. What are some of the risks and challenges that you see throughout this process?
Well, obviously, right now we're in the middle of a war. So it is a moment when the public sector has to step up and de-risk investments. This is what we are doing. We are providing two very important assets to this equation. First, financial support through guarantees. I have referred to them. Also loans, also blending loans and subsidies to make these investments profitable. I think the pan-European export credit guarantee is going to be very, very important in reinforcing national schemes and supporting European SMEs exporting to Ukraine. So financial advantage, very important. But the second asset we bring into the equation is the technical expertise to ensure that whatever is done in Ukraine is compatible with the European standards. So we are already investing and preparing the country for the accession, a successful accession process to the European Union. And I think that is, where the public sector has a key role to play at this stage, and also mobilizing and bringing in the private sector, which I am sure will start, seeing Ukraine as a profitable opportunity too.
Indeed. Thank you, Nadia Calviño, the president of the European Investment Bank. Very delighted to turn now to the left to these very distinguished gentlemen. And we have with us, what a great honor, the 70th U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, with us. But Secretary, you're actually here today in your capacity as board of directors of VEON, a U.S.-listed company that owns, amongst other things, Kyivstar. Before we get into the discussion, also want to give you a chance for some quick opening remarks.
First of all, thank you. It's great to be here today. It's great to be here as the former 70th Secretary of State as well, which gives me a different take on this as a private U.S. citizen now trying to help an incredibly important Ukrainian asset, Kyivstar, that delivers telecommunications to mobile handset and data services to a huge number of Ukrainians in this difficult time, and it's had, all the issues, right? Towers get knocked down, power gets knocked out. They had a huge, Kyivstar suffered a huge Russian cyber attack in the fall of last year. It reminds us all how serious this matter is, how important it is that we make sure we get this right for the people of Ukraine. I can see this corner being turned that you just described, and the German government has been central to this, the European government has been central. I can see the corner begin to be turned where people now recognize that the work, right, the hard work, it's not just about big macro investments. This is about getting every piece of the economic ecosystem right so that this capital will flow. I'm convinced that capital providers from around the world, big and small, the biggest most important German bank, American banks, but the next tier of capital providers will welcome the opportunity to participate in the rebirth of the Ukrainian economy. I'm convinced of that, and we can grow GDP there in a way that will accelerate for the betterment of the lives of the Ukrainian people in the aftermath of this war, and I can see that. But it's the blocking and tackling you referred to, right? Think about, you've got to get the mortgage system right. You've got to get the regulatory system right. You have to build out all the infrastructure components, the pieces of the system, the technical system, so that bureaucracies can do this at the speed that is required to actually deliver that. That's not a critique of Ukraine. The United States doesn't do that very well often either. You have to make sure that government is responsive when capital is prepared to come. And then the last piece is this transition from what has been largely global taxpayer financed support for the security of Ukraine, and I am thrilled and worked to ensure that the United States provided the $60+ billion that it did. This will begin to transition to a model that looks very different over time. It will look like a model that transitions through guarantees and subsidies and government support, government backing, credit backing as well, so that the capital can flow. But in the end, we have to ensure that the Ukrainian people get the schools rebuilt and the capacity to go train their workforce. All of these things are central features that will take time to go build out, but in the end will be the sustainable model that delivers a great outcome for Ukraine in the 2, 5, and 10 years that are in front of it. I'm optimistic that that will take place, but it will take the goodwill and hard work of people that are sitting here to my right, and then the private sector actors that I'm confident will want to rebuild this in a way that that vindicates all the work that we've done. And I'll close with this idea. This comes back to the central thesis that frankly caused some in my party in the United States to be reluctant to provide U.S. taxpayer support, and that is, in the end, we have to make sure that Ukraine wins. The world needs to perceive that this was a European victory, that Ukraine was the victorious party in this conflict. When that perception is achieved, these private sector issues, this capital flow issues will happen. In the event that that's not the case, in the event that this looks like the aggressor was victorious, and folks like Xi Jinping or Chairman Kim or Vladimir Putin can continue their aggression, this will cause capital not to move into these places because the fear will be too great. The risk will be perceived as too high. So we have to make sure that this is concluded in a way that justifies all the amazing work of the Ukrainian people to defend their homeland and to defend European sovereignty. And I'm convinced it's when we get that right, I'm convinced that the private sector will step up in the way that this conference demonstrates so ably as well. And thank you all for hosting it here in Germany. You all have done a fantastic job hosting this conference too. So thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Pompeo, for your remarks. I think, please. I think the optimistic tone of your remarks are very well received here in this audience and in the cities of Ukraine, that's for certain. Let me just follow up quickly, because from your unique perspective, you pointed out you may be in the business community now, but of course you have served as Secretary of State. So from your perspective and your background, what are some of the opportunities and challenges you see of doing business in the Ukraine today?
Oh my goodness. So look, we can list the challenges, the risks, but I see and know a incredibly wealthy nation. And when I say wealthy, I mean that in the most important way. First of all, the people. I've watched, particularly up close with respect to Kyivstar, I've watched some of the most resilient, amazing things. When I first got involved, I went there, I've had a chance to travel there a handful of times, and to go see the workforce and its dedication and commitment in the face of sirens going off is in the finest tradition of the human condition. And so I'm convinced when the conflict ends that human capital will be deployed in ways that will deliver the technicals, the skills, all the things that the leadership, the management skill sets that capital providers are going to want. So I'm very optimistic about that. Second, I come from Kansas. In Kansas, we grow red winter wheat. You all compete with us in the global marketplace for red winter wheat. The agricultural base for Ukrainian's economy, the industrial base for the Ukrainian economy that has existed and will continue to exist, provide enormous opportunities. It's going to take a lot of capital, a lot of flows. There'll be some of this that'll be long return time capital, so there'll need to be credit structures that are put in place to make that capital affordable for these Ukrainian businesses. And then finally, I also watch a set of leaders in Ukraine, a Ukrainian government that has now demonstrated its capacity to organize and lay down a strategy on a global scale that will, I think, provide an enormous amount of comfort to Western capital providers in the years ahead. I'm convinced that the government now understands what it takes to provide basic rule of law, infrastructure, all the elements of government that provide the backdrop against which capital can flow. I think the Ukrainian government, and including the ministers sitting here with me today, understand what will be required to get this to be right and are prepared to execute against that. So I am optimistic. It's not wishful thinking, I don't believe. I believe it is grounded in my understanding of the resources and talent skills that the Ukrainian people possess and what they'll be just as focused on in the years ahead as they have been pushing back against the evil of Vladimir Putin.
Optimism rooted in personal observations and experiences in dealing with the Ukrainian people. Thank you so much, Secretary Pompeo, for your remarks, and great to welcome back also on stage the Deutsche Bank CEO, of course, Mr. Sevik. Great to see you. Last time you and I were on stage was 2 years ago in Singapore. In many ways, easier times perhaps, but an easier context, if you will. But here we are, of course, at the very important Ukraine Recovery Conference. Very much looking forward to your opening remarks.
Does it work?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And I think the best signal, in particular with the huge task we all have ahead of us, is actually the panel itself, that you have private and public people, so to say, on the panel. Because the World Bank is talking about a reconstruction amount of 500 billion euros, which is needed in order to rebuild Ukraine. And in my personal view, it is simply our joint obligation and joint responsibility. And if you think about the amount of 500 billion euros, with all the respect to all finance ministers of this world, it's simply not doable from the public side on its own. And therefore, I really welcome also this morning's speeches by the Chancellor, by the President of the European Commission, when they talked about partnering up, obviously in particular with AIB, with KfW, but we then work with them and in order to actually leverage these amounts. And therefore, it must be a joint effort to stem this financing program going forward. And sometimes I feel that in the discussions, the financing of all this is only seen as kind of a task, but behind that, and that's also what I'm always talking about when we talk about the financing which is needed for other projects outside the Ukraine. What we are doing with that is financing growth. And what we need desperately back in Europe is growth. And therefore, I do think that actually the private sector has a huge task, has a huge opportunity here, and we simply need to find now the right solutions, not just talk about certain risks, and you talked about that, and of course we need to take this into account. But I do believe that actually banks, other financial institutions, but in particular banks with an investment bank and markets capability can actually structure a lot. We will sign this week 2 MOUs, one in order to finance a power plant in the Ukraine, another one together with the World Bank in order to make the accessibility and the availability of trade finance facilities easier for companies investing there, but also for local companies. Deutsche Bank has been in the Ukraine for 30 years. Of course, we stayed also over the last 2 or 3 years. And for us, we actually see that as an opportunity to grow. And if we partner up with public institutions, if we can, in particular at the start of this program, while the war is still ongoing, we need to talk about the right risk sharing. If we get this right, I'm absolutely sure that we can not only put our own balance sheet into it, but that we are the entry point to global investors who actually sees an opportunity. And that's where I see our task. That's where I see the private institutions stepping in, because I think in this regard, we are potentially ahead and have the best feel who are the global investors and what kind of structures can we offer in order to get that diversified pool of money. And there's lots actually, and there's lots of interest.
Thank you so much, Christian Sewing, for outlining the importance of the German private sector to invest in Ukraine. And you've talked about the opportunities. You just very quickly alluded to some risks and challenges. Want to push back just a quick and give you also an opportunity, just as I did with the Secretary, with Secretary Pompeo, how you assess the risk and challenges right now of doing business in Ukraine. What are some of the main hurdles that you are encountering?
Well, it's obvious, and I'm repeating a little bit that what the others have said. I mean, you know, it is obviously still wartime, and that makes it for us as private institutions extremely difficult and complex to put a lot of money at risk, and therefore we can mitigate that with the right structures. We work with public authorities. Number two, if you think about global investors, it is actually governance going forward, because global investors have global expectations. They have one global standard. So with all the efforts Ukraine is doing in order to fight this war, to fight the aggressor, we need to now step ahead and think about what are the minimum expectations of investors from the world in terms of minimum governance, transparency, also talking about, so to say, business plans going forward. But I do think that actually banks and institutions like ours, because we know what the minimum expectations of investors are, we can help here. And that's our task now, to exactly find this point where we are in order to attract these investors. And again, there is a lot of interest, and we should not forget the opportunities, whether it's German corporates, European corporates, or global corporates, actually to invest. And there, I think the opportunities are, in my view, in the long term, higher than the risks.
Thank you so much to both of you for highlighting the opportunities and the hopes also, if you will, associated with the recovery process of Ukraine moving forward. Now, we heard from the political leaders, we heard from international organization representatives, and of course, two outstanding business leaders, former political leader. But I want to close by giving both you, Minister, but also State Secretary Toms, a couple of minutes, just perhaps after everything you've heard here, what hopes, not just what hopes did you come in with into the conference, but perhaps more importantly, what are you hoping to get out of here within the next 48 hours, today and yesterday? Minister, I want to start with you.
No, as a Minister of Finance, I rather prefer not to think about some hopes, but think about if we have money in our accounts or we have already investment which materialized. That's why, but generally speaking, I see a lot of good signals from all sides, from public side, from business side, from banks, which are able to attract additional attention towards Ukraine, additional funds for Ukraine, because it's very necessary right now for us. And I believe this conference will create necessary ground for future, because what we seek for is new investment in Ukraine. Even today, even right now, despite all of this problem, despite all of these obstacles which we see on the ground, we see a lot of good examples when business which already operate in Ukraine start and think how to improve their investments, how to invest more in Ukraine. They don't think about how to transfer money from Ukraine. They think about future. That's why it's a good example. And I believe that this kind of cooperation of business on the ground and business which would like to be participate in reconstruction in Ukraine, which would like to invest in Ukraine, it create natural grounds for future cooperation. And again, this conference sometimes take some attention because there are a lot of political debates concerning future of Ukraine, a lot of statements of support, etc. But the real nature of these events, what we can collect after that. And I believe that when we meet next year, we can remember this conference as an event which creates necessary ground for future investment. This is my hope.
Yeah, absolutely a hope, I think, that is being shared by everyone here on stage and in the audience, and certainly also beyond. Thank you so much. State Secretary Thomas, you're going to get the final words on the stage. Also, your closing remarks is highlighting and articulating your hopes regarding the outcome of this important conference.
Well, this conference clearly is a great signal of support to Ukraine, of the international community. I'd like to focus on something Christian Sewing just said, because Sergei, you mentioned that there will also be a lot of investment needed. I like to frame it as opportunities also in the future. That's how we have to see it for a positive future of Ukraine. But in order to do that, of course, we have to focus on the framework conditions. We're doing just that, and the international community is doing that. The IMF is having a leading role in formulating a program for Ukraine, which somehow leads the way. But then, of course, public actors, first and foremost, the EIB, but also other banks like EBRD or the Council of Europe Bank are doing important work. What they're bringing is not only capital, what they're bringing is also expertise, like you have expertise also, Deutsche Bank, other banks have expertise that they can bring to the country. And we're doing the same, because something Mike Pompeo just said, I think it's extremely important that in the end, it's also those little details that you have to focus on, little changes in the laws, because the governance structures, and you've made great progress here, the governance structures need to be right. We need to focus on small things like reform of VAT or a form of reform of the excise tax. All those things do matter. Sometimes the way to freedom is paved with technicalities, but we're working on it. We work on it jointly, and this gives me hope, yes.
Thank you so much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, framework and conditions for economic growth and resilience. I think you would agree, having listened to this outstanding panel, that the importance of this conference cannot be overstated. I think each and every one of you have greatly contributed with your insights into laying out the risks and challenges, but more importantly, the opportunities in investing and doing business in Ukraine. Minister Marchenko, State Secretary Toms, President Calvino, Mike Pompeo, and of course, CEO Christian Sewing. Thank you so much for this valuable conversation. This is your applause. Much appreciated.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participating in the opening panels. The Ukraine Recovery Conference will resume shortly, with the opening of the Recovery Forum, followed by its stage program and the four-dimensional breakout sessions.